Welcome to the Ordinary Meeting of Council, 20 December 2023, last meeting for this year. Nalakadich wajak mort kan karak nija walilat budja, wejanang wajak kadajan wen yiting bula yeah. We acknowledge the Wajak people as the traditional owners of the Greater Fremantle Walilat area, and we recognise their cultural and heritage beliefs are still important today. The meeting is being recorded and streamed live online. Visitors in the public gallery and members of the public submitting a question may be captured during the recording. We have leaves of absence from Councillor Graham and Councillor Moughlin. Everyone else is here. We have an application for a leave of absence from Councillor Williamson Wong from the 6th to the 20th of February 2024. So I will move that and ask for a seconder. Councillor Sullivan. All those in favour? Yep, that's approved. Are there any other leaves of absence requested? No? Good. Do we have any disclosures of interest by members? Councillor Williamson Wong?
I'm declaring an impartiality conflict with the Phillimore Street item because of a long-standing relationship with the architects, but I'm happy to stay and debate the item.
Thank you. I don't think you have a choice with an impartiality interest, so we look forward to your contribution. Okay. Any other disclosures of interest? No. The agenda has some responses to questions that were taken on notice at the last ordinary meeting of council. That's going to take us to public question time. I have 4 people listed to speak on general matters, I think. Yep. And the remainder of the speakers we will invite to speak prior to the item that you have listed. If you need to leave and you want to speak at the beginning of the meeting and then get out of here, that is also fine. So after I've called the people who have just wanted to speak on general matters, I will check the gallery to see if there's anyone else who wants to speak in this point of the agenda. Otherwise, before the items that you've listed, we will take questions or comments. Hopefully that's clear to everyone. If you are asking a question or making a statement, you have 3 minutes. An alarm will sound towards the end of that 3 minutes, and it would be great if you could start wrapping up as soon as you hear that alarm. Okay, so on general matters, we have Mei Ring Chen first up.
Good evening, everyone. This is going back to the number plate recognition. Just have a question. If the number plate recognition has been installed, how are you going to deal with infringements? And will the fines cost be deducted directly from the credit card of the offending person or the digital wallet? And then will Frio residents still have access to free parking? And how will that work with the number plate recognition? And are you going to keep areas where the parking is free because there are certain areas in Fremantle where you can park the cars for free? Then how many facial recognition cameras have the city installed since COVID? And I would like to know where they are and who monitors the recording and what's happening with the data that is being recorded. Thank you.
I'll see if we can answer any of those tonight, but certainly a second pass sounds like something that might need to be on notice. Did you want to take any of those tonight? Yeah, okay.
Just generally, the license plate recognition only relates to infringements. We're yet to roll the system out. That's likely to occur early next year, and we'll be able to confirm, I guess, the technical details of how that will work for payment systems at that time, but happy to take those questions on notice and get back to you.
If you have a hard copy of those questions, if you could pass them to agendas and minutes, that would be appreciated. Thank you. I will remind everyone to speak right into the microphone so that the streaming can be heard and the gallery can hear us as well. The next person I have with a general matter is Lynn Wicks.
Hello, my name is Lynn Weeks and I'm a resident of Fremantle. I hope you all received and have read the 2 recent emails that I sent about my concerns about the upcoming Rainbow Drag Storytime event in the Fremantle Town Hall on Wednesday, the 17th of January 2024. And my questions are about this event. The first one is, was the event approved as an operational or as a policy issue? Number 2, were all elected council members consulted about this event, and did this item come to council for approval? If no, then why not? And if yes, then what date was this event approved by the Fremantle Council? 3, how much will this event cost ratepayers? Number 4, will the fees for the Town Hall be waived for this event? And if yes, why are the organisers not obliged to pay? And if no, how much will the fees for the Town Hall be? And number 5, do all drag queens, paid and voluntary staff who will be working at the event have current working with children clearances? And if yes, then were they current at the time of approval of the event from the Fremantle Council and the booking of the event? And if no, then why not? And number 6, the invitation says that everyone is welcome to join from young to old. So how can adults without children register to attend this event? So these questions are all on notice. So could I have a written response, please, to them? And my email is, I've given it to the lady at the door, and my email address is on the.
Thanks, Lynn. I would invite the director if he wants to make any comment at this point about that event.
Thanks for the question. Through the chair, happy to supply a written response. Just a few general comments. This programming's become quite common across libraries across Western Australia, and our first foray into this programming was actually done in collaboration with the Literature Centre of Fremantle, and the next one coming up in January is already been almost booked out, I believe, and there's quite a lot of support in the community for the programming. There's the city's access and inclusion plan references programming that allows people to engage with a variety of events through the cultural program. This particular program you have to book tickets to, as you noted, so there's not an incidental audience factor. It is held in the town hall. There is no hire fee for the town hall because the city is booking and managing the event. I don't know the exact fee for the performer, but it would be in the realms of $200 to $300. But happy to get back to you with a written response for everything.
Thank you. On general items, we've got Elizabeth McGraw.
The motto of Fremantle's coat of arms reads, "Neither by entreaty nor by bribery," and the Roman original goes on to say, "to be drawn from the right path." Why do I have this overwhelming sense that these values may not apply to the running and management of Fremantle? Firstly, I wish to join the Fremantle Society and all those who made the case against the addition of 4 two-story apartments on the rooftop of 49 Phillimore Street. This will not contribute to the conservation and heritage maintenance of this building and its setting being the West End. This addition contravenes heritage conservation guidelines. To the sale of a portion of number 515 Quarry Street to Golestani Developments Lot 1, 2 and 8. Given 46 Bellevue Terrace with 169 square meters sold for over $500,000, being unlivable, unviewable and unbankable, the Financial Review. Both a market valuation of 3.8 million and a purchase price of 4.35 million seem extraordinarily low for 3,244 square meters. Please clarify who provided the market valuation, where and when was the sale of this property advertised, who sold the property, and how many offers were received. To parking in Fremantle. 11 months ago, a communique in Sorona's Urban Post read, "Coming soon, additional car parking in Fremantle. We hear you, it's never easy to find a parking in Freo." Yet, 10 months later, the council approved development by Sorona that will deliver the absolute minimum of residential parking bays, including a shortfall of 8 motorcycle bays and a shortfall of 33 car parks for the commercial tenancy, plus the deletion of 4 on-street parking. Please clarify, will this extraordinary parking concession apply to every other development in Fremantle? Lastly, I refer to the city's refusal to provide a definition of what a modern city is in the context of Fremantle. The city talks about our modern city in the introduction to the Fremantle Oval Draft Conservation Management Plan, as an example. Again, what is the definition of a modern city in the context of Fremantle? Thank you.
Thank you. And I have Helen McLeod also listed for general business.
Good evening. My question concerns the proposed development of 49 Phillimore Street, West End, Fremantle.
Did you, sorry, just a moment, did you want to speak before, I mean, that item will be first up on the agenda.
No, it's only going to be one question because
That's fine.
I have
no
another
worries.
appointment.
Sure.
This outstanding building is a significant landmark sited within the commercial precinct of the West End Heritage Area. The conservation and sustainability of this building embodies the notion that cultural, social, and built heritage is an inheritance to be respected and maintained so as to pass on these values to the next generation. As elected custodians of our city, please explain how you will manage the height and scale of 49 Phillimore Street, located within the most intact 19th century streetscape in the whole of Australia. How will this be retained to conserve the building's historical integrity and the integrity of the West End Heritage Area? Thank you.
Thank you. So when we come to the agenda, that's everything everyone has listed at the moment for general business. When we come to the order of the agenda, based on who is in the gallery and what items you're here for, we'll do Phillimore Street first up, and then we'll go to the late item, the South Beach Change Facility, and then we'll go back to the agenda as per its original order. If you're here and you think you don't want to stay for the duration of those items, you are welcome to have your question or statement now. So I'll just give you that opportunity. If you want to jump up and do that, that's fine. If Mr. Kerr, if you want to do that, that's fine. We appreciate people have other things they want to be doing this time of year.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to talk to the late item. I hope to stay for it, but depending on how long the previous one takes, I might have to go. So this is to do with the tenders for construction of the South Beach Change Facility. And I have to say it's not just with the benefit of hindsight that the situation of the South Beach toilets could be seen as almost inevitable. At every stage of the process, members of the community have expressed disquiet about the way the project was developing and its likely cost. Now, the consultation process was indeed extensive, but I have to say it seemed to have no visible point of conclusion. It was a classic example of what, when Pam Beggs was Minister for Transport, we used to call the merry-go-round model of decision-making. Pam was very good at getting a wide range of stakeholders around the table, but found it difficult to finalise things. If any participant didn't like the likely outcome, they'd be able to restart the discussion. And that is some source of frustration for the community in this instance. This process creates uncertainty, takes significantly longer, and results in design creep, all of which result in increased cost. In addition, the issue of unaffordability, as talked about in the report, cannot be dissociated from the method of funding. In this case, Council decided, in the context of a 9% increase in rates, to fund 2.15 million out of current, i.e. 2023-24 rates, instead of loan funding. Loan funding, of course, would have spread the cost over time and meant that the impost on current ratepayers would be less. As it is, current ratepayers would be bearing the full remaining construction cost. On top of this, I have to say the failures of the project, together with Council's canning of the Fremantle Cat, appear to indicate that the South Beach Place plan itself is in danger of becoming a massive failure. So I have a number of questions tonight. Firstly, given that there have been temporary toilets at South Beach in one form or another for getting on for 2 years now, how much of the temporary toilets, including those now removed, cost ratepayers, including the sewerage, water and electricity connections? Secondly, how much of the total budget has already been spent, and how much of this would not be usable if the project were to be substantially changed? Thirdly, how much of the total budget has already been committed, and how much of this would not be recoverable if the project were to be substantially changed? Fourthly, in view of the history of this project, how realistic is it to, quote, review the building design proposal and also, quote, re-engage the market with timelines similar to the current delivery forecast, as stated in part 2 of the recommendation? Fifthly, if Council adopts the officer recommendation, is there any impact on the Department of Communities grant, which formed part of the funding? And secondly, somewhat tongue-in-cheek, I have to admit, will the City of Fremantle refund to current ratepayers the 2.15 million from the current budget from which they will get no benefit? Thank you.
Thank you. All right, were there any other folks who wanted to jump up now? Yep, come on up.
Hello. I would like to speak about the South Beach toilets, or lack thereof. My first question is, when can we expect at all when we're going to have them there again, number one? Number two, when will it be started? Do you have any contractors in mind? And do you have a risk management in place for that project when you do assign a contract? And I hear that you've got two people who have applied, whatever, and you've knocked them back because of the cost. I'd like to know what, in fact, you are looking for in the way of cost, why they were knocked back. And the last question really for me is, will the project contract be another, like the Kerry Hill project for this place, where time sensitive was involved? Because that makes a huge difference to the cost, because we all know what happened there. So those are the questions really. A, when can we expect a toilet that people can use who've got wheelchairs? This Christmas, as you probably know, every Christmas that quite a few groups of people, families, go down there every Christmas Day, some of whom are in wheelchairs. And it's the first time when you put all those toilets up, the original temporary toilets, they actually worked. But this lot that we've got, you chose to knock down all of that, and now we're waiting. We've got a dust bowl there, and we've got absolutely nothing at all. I've seen people go back, just so you know that. And this isn't impressive for Fremantle. So I'd like to get an answer as to when you think you will be starting this year, and when you think it'll be finished, and will it be time sensitive when you do that, and will you have a risk management in place so that we don't end up paying a hell of a lot more than we have to. And last thing I'd like to say, and this is a statement I'd like to bring up, which might be a bit contentious, but I'm going to say it anyway, and that is, it was brought to my attention today that because I didn't vote for the newest councillor here, and I'm quite happy to have her on council, let's get that clear, but it was brought up to me today by several people, one of whom is involved with this council, that apparently everyone seems to have put my name forward, possibly not you guys, for the writer of some letter that went somewhere in South Fremantle. Now, two things. I want to make it very clear. It was not me. My name is Saz Cole. I had nothing whatsoever to do with it. And the other thing is that if I had, the grammar would have been a hell of a lot better than what it was. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. All right. If there are no further people who wish to speak in general business, then I'll move through the other items and then to the agenda items that you're here for. So we have, to the best of my knowledge, no petitions, deputations or special deputations. We do have some items under the heading of presentations. So Councillor Kamada is going to give a short presentation, and I am going to speak to some presentation items as well. And then we'll head through to the rest of the agenda. So Councillor Kamada, over to you.
Thank you, Mayor Fitzhardy. I know there's a lot on the agenda tonight, but I thought it was worth sharing a significant achievement for one of our local schools. Last month, I had the privilege of attending my first...
I'm going to get you just a bit closer to the microphone.
Last month, I had the privilege of attending my first Winterfold Primary School reconciliation meeting, and not only was it great to reconnect with some of the people that I got to know when my son attended the school some years ago, but most importantly, it was obvious from the outset that this group is doing some fantastic work. It was a really warm and inclusive environment. The discussion was open and honest, and there was no shying away from some of the hard questions and hard issues. It was no surprise to learn that from that experience that Winterfold Primary School was the school category winner of the Reconciliation Australia Narraganawali Awards. I hope I pronounced that right. Now, the chair of the awards judging panel and Reconciliation Australia board director, Sharon Davis, said the school inspired the judges with its strong connections to its local Noongar community and a vigilant policy of anti-racism. Winterfold's principal told the judges that the reconciliation and anti-racism was at the core of the school's culture and curriculum, and this was obvious to us all when we visited the school, they said. Now, I'd like to congratulate, obviously, the school for the great work that they've done and for being great leaders in implementing outstanding reconciliation initiatives. And I've asked if we could just show a short video which really sums up the whole the achievement. So if we could see that, that'd be fantastic.
Yep.
Thank you.
Permission granted.
Why is reconciliation important? That's the $1 million question, because it's everything, and it starts with all of us walking together. I think that's really important for us to do. But I guess it's just bringing to the lens the importance of teaching anti-racism and starting right from a young age, so right from kindy all the way through to our year sixes.
Sharing the language now is about connecting, us reconnecting back to country. Children are taking language into their homes and teaching their parents, their grandparents, aunties and uncles. It's about healing, and healing to me is through language.
here at Winterfold, we have made a commitment to truth telling, so we don't shy away from being honest, even with young children, about the truth of the stolen generations, because it's the truth. I am a Wodjila. I cannot teach Noongar. I'm privileged to learn Noongar with the blessing of my Noongar language teacher and with the support of the Aboriginal parents on the Reconciliation Committee. I share what I learn. I like to frame it that we're learning together.
Cultural awareness is the first step to, I guess, breaking that barrier of reconciliation.
There's one teacher here that she can't exactly teach it because she's not Aboriginal, but she can share. And they both do have a connection because they both share information about the culture's ways.
It's heartwarming to listen to children talk about animals and birds. Instead of using English, they're actually calling them their original names, which is heartwarming.
And we also know the importance of this work, so it is really an opportunity to put the spotlight again on reconciliation. So every opportunity we have to champion reconciliation and talk about reconciliation, then we're up for it.
Thank you for sharing that, Councillor Kamada. And congratulations to Winterfold Primary. That is really great. I also wanted to present some of the awards actually that we've won this year, and I do that not to show off about the awards that we've won this year, but really to acknowledge the staff who have been involved in us winning those awards. So I've asked the two directors who are responsible for those staff to hold up the awards. They're over there. We received the third year in a row the Excellence in Local Government for Tourism Award, which is an acknowledgement of the work that's done through our Destination Marketing Working Group that works with, experts and industry professionals to look at how we get people to visit our city. It's a recognition of the people in our visitor centre who do an incredible job, particularly all the volunteers who are out there in their shirts, greeting people every day, giving great advice. We get incredible feedback from the public about their experience of Fremantle based on being greeted by these people, and it's something volunteers also tell us that they love doing. It's the third year in a row that we've won this award, which A means we can't win it again. They've knocked us out now and Mandurah can have a crack. But it also means we're now inducted into the Hall of Fame, which is quite a prestigious thing. And I think the first or second time since the awards began that a local government has actually been inducted into the Hall of Fame. So it's probably a demonstration for us that concerted efforts pay off, and that working with people who are in the industry and who understand what works in the industry means that you get it right. So it's an award for us, that's very nice, but it's really an award for all the people that we work with to deliver those outcomes. So big acknowledgement to all the people involved in that. Thank you, Mr. Hammond. We also won this year 2 awards for what we do over at Montreal Street. We won the Changemaker Award for the Fremantle Containers for Change refund point, which was recognised as WA's best medium-sized operator. And we also won the Waste Sorted Award for the City of Fremantle Recycling Centre in the Metro Local Government category. So any of you who've used these facilities will know that they're staffed by exceptional human beings who genuinely care about reducing the amount of things that go to landfill and do everything that they can to facilitate that. And so from the minute you get to the gate, you know these people are trying to help you make sure your waste goes anywhere but landfill. The Containers for Change, everyone gets excited about those, sexy machine ones where you go in there and you throw it all in a pile and a machine counts it. But one of the things that's really special about our Containers for Change is that there are people who may not be employed otherwise who are able to work there and really enjoy working there. So yes, it sometimes takes a couple more minutes to go to our Containers for Change facility, but you do also get a smile and a chat and a nice customer service experience. It also means that becomes part of, it gets invested back into the community in Fremantle, which doesn't necessarily happen with a commercial operator. So it's really good recognition, and it's just recognition of the passion, I think, of the people who work in those areas. And as we know, other people would love to, other people can use the Containers for Change facility. Other people would also really like to be able to use a recycling centre, and we've had East Fremantle come on board, so their ratepayers can also use the recycling centre because of the service it offers. The tip shop is not quite the Denmark tip shop, but it's getting there. It's pretty impressive, and it's always a good first stop if you want some weird and wacky thing to do a job around the house. They give you great advice about what you can find in there. So congratulations to the waste team, and yes, an amazing achievement for this year. Okay, that's all I've got for presentations. I thought we'd do a job lot of awards because there were quite a few of them this year. So would someone like to move that we confirm the minutes of the last meeting? Councillor Thompson, and seconded by Councillor Sullivan, and all those in favour. And that's unanimous. And is there any elected member communication? No, I don't think there is. All right, so we're going to now take questions and statements on the Phillimore Street development. So I'll go through my list. Just hand it over and we'll get back. Alrighty, so we will go through, I think, pretty much in the order that we have listed, although I may put the architect towards the end just to respond to anything that has been raised by the other members in the gallery, if that makes sense. All right, so Carl Payne, you're our first speaker on that one.
Change glasses. Thank you for the opportunity, councillors. I'm the DA for 49 Phillimore Street. Fremantle Council planning officers and the Heritage Council are both taking a very pragmatic view. But of course, JDAP notwithstanding, it's councillors who set the future agenda for Fremantle and who make today's decisions. I disagree with the views of both the Heritage Council and the officers' recommendation for the following reasons. One, we know from Robodebt, for example, that not all expert opinion is correct. Two, the West End precinct is a living example of an intact and beautiful 19th century streetscape, is greater than the sum of its individual parts. The individual buildings, with some exceptions, are generally not particularly outstanding architectural examples of their type. The strength of the West End is in the total composition, the streetscape, cityscape taken as a whole. In this context, this overscaled and massive proposed addition in Phillimore Place is a serious heritage management mistake. The experts, the Heritage Council and your planners are taking too narrow a view. They are seeing good architecture in the DA, texture, rhythmic verticals and horizontals, appropriate materials and the like. And they're therefore concluding that the developer has met all required and relevant design expectations. The simple truth is that the rooftop massing we will clearly see at 49 Phillimore Place sets a hugely dangerous precedent. It's easy to imagine development floodgates opening as a direct result of approving this DA. We know our mayor is in favour of a large expansion to Freo's population. Unfortunately, building $2 million townhouses on top of a West End heritage building can never be central to a meaningful, sustainable and balanced population growth strategy. We mustn't do it piecemeal. We mustn't let developers control the agenda. Detailed, integrated strategic planning by council is crucial. For this DA, none of the above considerations are in the mind of the Heritage Council. They're simply judging a single building, when what it really is an important piece in a very serious jigsaw puzzle. This is a deadly serious debate. I say deadly because this roof-type massing approach will kill our West End. We have to stop this chipping away at our heritage streetscapes. They are so easily diluted and then totally lost. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your very exceptional timing as well. Marianne Goodlick. Thank you.
Right. Now, excuse me, I can't see without my glasses, but I have to read. So let's see. Okay, so I'm Marianne Goodlich, and I'm a member of the Fremantle Society. In reference to the heritage impact statements, which I'll be using for reference, for am I not? For 49 Phillimore Street, I agree that it is an example of Gold Rush interwar architecture, that it has aesthetic significance, and it is a landmark. My objection to the development proposal is the addition of 2-storey apartments on top of the existing building, which are not sympathetic to the heritage values of the West End, Phillimore Street, or the building itself. The added height impacts the aesthetics, the mass and the scale of the existing building, and no amount of spin on the virtue of having residential apartments with views will lessen the impact. I disagree with several statements made in the heritage impact statement in relation to the rooftop apartments, but I might just skip that because it's mainly to do with, what they claim the setback and the height and the landscaping, etc., will how it will ameliorate it. It is disappointing that the Quest development across the road is referenced as a measure with which to justify the proposal. 49 Phillimore Street is a gateway building. As you walk or drive into Fremantle along Phillimore Street, that's my end of the sentence. From the sample photographs, which you can see in here very clearly, you will be able to see that it will definitely, the proposed apartments would negatively impact this landmark building, and no amount of setback up the top, parapet, or landscaping will ameliorate the negative impact of the height, mass, and scale of the proposed apartments. I ask the Council to reject this proposal as it has been submitted and give priority to the heritage values over the developers' values. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. John Dowson is next up.
Oh, thank you, Mayor and councillors. Look, from our perspective, the way Fremantle Council is mishandling Fremantle's precious and famous heritage is absolutely shocking. In 3 minutes, I can only deal with 49 Phillimore Street, but on your agenda tonight, the Fremantle Oval issues are major. They included effective conservation plan, possible conflicts of interest, and other issues, and they're all covered on the front page of this week's Herald. With 49 Phillimore Street, it is distressing to see that after decades of work from a lot of people, that the protection for the integrity of the West End is being swept away. The Fremantle Society saved this building in the 70s from being an office block. Now it's under attack again. And the precedent will lead to the ruination because so many other places in the West End can and will apply for this sort of major discretion. Interestingly, yesterday's front page of the Albany Advertiser contains an article about the Heritage Council not listing an 1830s property in Albany and the scandal about that. And your advice from the Heritage Council is that this is okay because even though it damages some of the building, it's fixing up the inside. Now, my advice to you is not to trust the Heritage Council. And I think the councillors have to trust their own instincts. There's so many things to go through, and I've only got a couple of seconds left. But one of the things the report keeps saying is that, this is from the developers, is that the local identity of Fremantle will be reinforced and will bring economic benefit. Well, economic benefit is not supposed to be part of the equation. Your council itself spent $140,000 on the local identity code. And I wonder how many of you have actually read it, or how many developers actually are told to go and use it. And it says actually on the very last page that the code recommends no height or building line deformations be permitted for corner buildings. Well, I wish somebody had read that. As we know, this building is asking for a 20% discretion, which is massive, and it's also taking out large areas of masonry and replacing them with glass. The last thing to say is to have a look at the heritage impact statement and look at the statements in there, such as it will provide unique residential opportunities for views over the harbour. Really? It will provide aesthetic contributions to the West End. It will have a significant positive impact on the cultural significance and integrity. I mean, these are nonsense. These are infantile justifications that you should sweep aside. And my final comment is that the Heritage Impact Statement finishes with this statement. It says, applicants seek not to make a percent for art contribution. They don't want to do that because the building is a significant landmark that should be celebrated in its purest form. In its purest form is as it is, pretty much with nothing added that can be seen from the street, as is the norm in the West End. Thank you.
Thank you, former Councillor Dowson. All right, we've got Tim Dawkins listed next. Thanks, Tim.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor and councillors. This is the first time I've addressed council since the elections in October, so congratulations to all new councillors and returning councillors. Today I'm here obviously on item 11, which is 49 Fillmore Street, Fremantle. I'm extremely proud of this application and pleased to be continuing to be involved in key projects that build on Fremantle's global reputation as an exceptional place. As I'm sure is well known, the proponents are long-time advocates of Fremantle and in particular have a strong affinity for the West End and have several businesses in the area. This proposal has been carefully considered for some time before we lodged the application, with a consultant team led by local architecture studio Space Agency. The team has a strong track record, arguably unrivaled, in delivering excellent heritage conservation and adaptive reuse outcomes. Preservation in the West End does not mean there is never any change. In fact, it is dependent upon it. We are no longer doing the activities in the heart of Fremantle that the building was conceived and built for. It needs to be adapted to accommodate relevant uses for today. The building at 49 Fillmore Street is sensational, but it's run down. This would have been seen by any of the councillors who took up the offer of a site visit earlier in the week. The proposal represents the opportunity for significant investment to extend the life of the building well into the future and carry out significant conservation works and some important maintenance works, and it'll be filled with people and reveal some of the heritage fabric that are currently hidden by some unfortunate barnacles of the recent past. The proposed addition of the modest and two-storey thing is in keeping with the broader precinct and presents as a secondary element to the heritage building. Having been participating in conversations about the future of Fremantle for many years and hearing the vision of elected members and the broader community, there are two key aspirations Council has continuously pursued. One is a significant increase in the resident population in the core of the Fremantle CBD, and the secondly is an increase in the diversity and range of people employed in the area. The adaptation from a historical warehouse to an office that provide amenity to attract a tier 1 tenant, an employer of scale that is largely missing in the area due to a lack of suitable premises in Fremantle. In summary, the proposal has been endorsed by the Heritage Council of WA, supported by the City's Design Review Panel and recommended for approval by the City's officers. It is also worth noting that during the public advertising period, the application received only 7 objections and 26 letters of support. Quite remarkable. We thank the planning staff for their time in assessing and reviewing the application. Michael Petroni will now speak, or soon speak, about the detailed architectural considerations and key design moves that have been employed to resolve the proposal successfully. And after that, we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Tim. And I've got Leo MC and then Michael Petroni left to speak. Elected members, what I might ask is that at the end of all the speakers, if you do have questions for anyone who has spoken, if you can let me know, and we'll bring them up to the microphone for your questions.
Hey, how you going?
Leo. MC Leo.
Personal statement, I'm not an expert. I don't know much about architecture, but I feel strongly about this. I've always felt Fremantle has always challenged power, and I'm not going to go on a rant about this part, but whenever we make a decision, it's always easy to make a decision if it's in link with power. And developers do have power in WA. Now, I'm not saying the current one is proposing this. They usually do a good job. And I actually believe their intentions are good as well. But it obviously will damage the fabric of Fremantle. And I'm saying this because I feel West Australians, we typically think small of ourselves. People go to Paris and they'll go to Europe and they'll go on about how wonderful Europe is. And I'm always there to correct them and say, no, the Europe we know today was built really in the 1850s, the 1860s. Fremantle's about 40 years older than that. You go to Paris, that was built by, I think, Napoleon III, 1860 something. So we've got a little bit of Europe in here. We've got a small little piece. And the issue we have today is a repeat of the 1960s, but under a new form. And in the 1960s, people had the justification. It was after the Second World War, and we demolished all, the ugly old things which represented royalty and all the rest of it. But we came to realise we'd made a mistake because we didn't think through this. And Fremantle somehow avoided this. The city of Perth didn't. And if you ask tourists who come here, where they always say they're going, they always say they're going to Fremantle. And this little thing, like demolishing basically the top half of it and building 2 extra stories, you wouldn't see that in Newtown, Sydney. You wouldn't see that in Paris. You wouldn't see that in large parts of London. And I'm proud of Perth. I'm not someone who particularly loves to travel the world. I love our history and I love our buildings. And I think when you think about this, I'm not going to suggest that JDAP is biased, but we know it's a foregone conclusion. So it really doesn't cost Fremantle anything, the City of Fremantle Council opposing this. It's more of a moral decision, not a big one. The moral decisions are always, choosing the right thing, which may not be what I'm saying, but choosing the right thing is never the easy decision. It's always a little bit difficult, a little bit unsettling. And everyone's probably made up their minds about this, but just think about this. This is, 10 streets in the West End? If we do this, it will lead to others. And just look, there's a big blue shard which sticks out in the building opposite of it. Now, I don't know the psychology of the proposal, but that would influence this, and this will have a reverberation, influence something else. And just on a personal level, when people visit Fremantle, I know this on Freo Massive, people take pictures, and just always observe they take that angle to avoid the new. So 10 streets, and I'm just a plea, please keep that in mind. That's all we want.
Thank you, Leo. All right, and last person on this item, unless anyone has come in since we started, I don't think so. Michael Petroni.
Well, good evening, everyone. The originally named Robert Harper Building was built in the 1920s on the corner of Phillimore and Pakenham Street. And over that time, it is slowly and gracefully aged and to a degree deteriorated, but also the functions and the world around it has changed significantly from the flour milling office that was built on the corner and the warehouse that surrounded it in Pakenham Street. The building as it is at the moment is in desperate need of some love. The built form is deteriorating and it needs restoration. Internally, the building has had some sort of modest modifications to try and adapt the former warehouse to an office, but it is seriously under provided with amenity for people who would actually live there, actually work there. So it is a building that desperately needs some attention. What is proposed is that the restoration of the built fabric, the adaptation of the warehouse into modern office space, and also the addition on the rooftop of residences will attract workers and residents to live and sort of vitalise this part of town. Currently, the building is underutilised. It's an underutilised resource and is desperately in need of maintenance and restoration, which obviously requires funds. In regards to the restoration, what is proposed is that the external fabric of the building, that all of the paint will be removed from the brick walls and they will be restored to the original brick appearance of the building. Similarly, the stucco will have the paint removed and repaired to deal with the corrosion that's happening to that particular element. The timber joinery will be restored, and also the noticeable feature of the building is the cupola. That will also be repaired and reclad with its original material. Also, significantly, the intrusive elements that were introduced in the 1990s down in Pakenham Street, these are the windows which are sort of mimic the original window, the windows at the front will be removed, and the whole of the Pakenham Street elevation will be returned elementally to closer to what it was when it was originally built. Internally, a lot of the plasterboard partitions, bulkheads, and other things which cover up the original parts of the internal fabric will be removed. Pressed metal ceilings will be revealed once again. The underside of warehouse floors with timber joists and herringbone bracing will be revealed in the office spaces. Should I just keep going? Steel columns will be exposed and will be seen.
Bring it to a conclusion because we can ask questions if needed.
I suppose I'll get to the contentious issue, which is obviously the height, which there's been plenty of talk about tonight. Yes, the building is higher, and the addition will be seen from afar. We have prepared and supplied to council a number of fly-throughs and that will demonstrate how this addition will be seen from afar. It will be seen, but it all sits very comfortably within the topography of the West End in terms of its roofscape. It does not stand out. The West End roofscape topography is not a single level. It is full of bumps and lumps, different materials, and all sorts of form. It sits within there comfortably.
Should we leave the rest for questions?
Shall I just finish by just saying it has been endorsed by the Heritage Council of WA, but pointing out that this building is not individually listed on the state register. What is registered is its position within the West End. The Heritage Council looked at the West End as the element which was most important and to be protected in their assessment of this application.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Thank you. All right, councillors, did anyone have any questions for any of our speakers on this item? Giving you a minute to think. Nope. All right. Well, it looks like we will get into the debate then. So, do I have someone who would like to move the officer's recommendation on this item? Councillor Van Dawson, seconder. Thank you, Councillor Archibald. It's going to be a long night at this rate. All right. Councillor Van Dawson, did you want to open debate?
Thank you, Mayor, and apologies, it's my first time moving a motion and opening a debate. I'm not quite sure what to say, but I was happy to move the item for debate. It's my personal view. I have had lots of emails from the community and appreciate and acknowledge their concerns. From my perspective, and it's the first heritage application I've had to consider with such objections from the community, so it's not an easy decision to make. But I'll just say in my decision making, I look at the recommendations of the experts, which and I did say in my email that it is supported by the Heritage Council and our city officers as well as the Design Advisory Committee. But yeah, I just want to open the debate. I'm really look forward to what other people have to say on the item. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Van Dawson. Councillors, any further discussion? This could be a very short item. Councillor Sullivan.
A lot of shyness tonight. I thought I was going to get to hear all of the positives and then throw in a few of my own comments afterwards. For those who know me well, they would know that I fought against a lot of buildings back in the 80s and 90s that I thought at the time were excessive in height. Number 1 High Street being a very important one. Customs House building, where they, just around the corner from this, where they hollowed out the development completely and built a brand new building inside, some of which sets a precedent for this site. And I also fought against the 80s version, sorry, the more recent version of the Customs House building, where they were proposing 2 stories on top of that, right out on the streetscape edge of that building. So I'm not shy about fighting against development that doesn't fit in to the West End. On this one, I'm line ball, and I'm not absolutely sure which way to vote tonight, and I'll be giving it a fair amount of consideration before voting for it when it comes to JDAP. Some comments were made about a few things which certainly jumped into my head in looking at it as well. One could be described as the Quest Hotel creep, planning creep. The fact that we allowed a couple of stories to be added to the top of an old warehouse building, which was of probably less importance than this building, and in a less significant location than this building. And I think we made the right decision with that one. From memory, I supported it. However, the difficulty we find in planning in the West End is that every time we make those sorts of decisions, they get kind of like turned against us on the next application as the precedents. Now, the precedent does exist. It's perfectly reasonable to apply for additional height when it already exists in the area. But of course, there are multiple criteria that have to be run through and considered when we want to look at whether or not that additional height actually satisfies the criteria that must be satisfied before approving it. And I'll come back to that later. I also note tonight, and it's again a view that I tend to share, is that we get these reports from the Heritage Council of WA, basically saying from a state heritage perspective, it's okay. Maybe it is. But we're the local government, we have our local heritage considerations, which are far more extensive than the state levels. And we have, because of that, put in place quite a depth of planning and precinct policies to try and make it presumably a bit easier for us to deliver the local heritage outcome that we know we want for the West End. So the State Heritage Council giving something its blessing is rarely something that persuades me one way or the other. It typically still means that I have to go back and look in great detail at whether it satisfies our Fremantle requirements. There's only one major aspect of this proposal that troubles me to the extent of not knowing whether to support or not support it. The bit that doesn't worry me are the 3 units down Pakenham Street, not the corner one, but the 3 units running down Pakenham Street. I look at those and I acknowledge that they don't comply, they don't fit within the built form envelope that is normally required for the West End. But the narrowness of Pakenham Street and the way in which you view things from Pakenham Street, and the fact that there's already, I guess, the Custom House building, Notre Dame now, has pretty much established the built form almost exactly the same as what's been proposed. And I walk past that every day, and it doesn't outrage me. It doesn't change my perspective of the beauty of the West End. And I think the way these will be viewed in that environment would be much the same, and I'm accepting of those. As I said, the other bit that I think needs to be commended as extremely important in terms of the outcome for the West End is, and it's not just that the building is going to be conserved, because that shouldn't be the be-all and end-all or something. It's the way that the existing building is going to be conserved and used into the future. So it's rare these days that we get an opportunity to see a big warehouse space in the West End re-established as a big space that people can go into and enjoy. And I think what they're proposing to do to the existing building is exemplary, and that has to be taken into account in the overall consideration of the proposal. So we've got to give credit where it's due, and it is absolutely due in that part of the proposal. So that gets me to the bit that I remain troubled by, and that's if you look at the plans, it's everything on the harbour side of Gridline K. So the building is in two parts. It's a warehouse and it's an office building on the corner. As was said, corner buildings are really important in Fremantle. They're often beautifully articulated. They round the corner, literally. They present with their domes and those sorts of things. And this one, is the corner building is actually quite small. The bulk of the building is a warehouse. But the corner unit, because the corner of the building has a much higher parapet, the corner unit is also trying to step up so it can see over that parapet. And I understand that's entirely logical that you would want to do that. But it also means that it exceeds the height limits more significantly in the location where it's most critical. It's most critical because it's not just a narrow West End street like Pakenham Street. It's a wide street like Phillimore Street. And it's in an area of town where you really do get quite significant views from a long way away. Potentially into the future from, all the way from Victoria Quay when the areas are opened up. And I wonder whether the architects could have, or the applicants, you never really know whether it's the architects or the applicants driving the design, but I do wonder whether that corner unit couldn't have been tightened up a little bit to the extent of trying to bring most of the bulk behind Gridline K. And I would leave that thought with the architects for consideration between now and the JDAP meeting. I look at it, I see things like an amazingly overly generous apartment lobby area where they could easily have pushed some of the ground floor of the corner unit into. I look at aspects of, I guess, the sort of concave treatment, trying to, I guess, reflect the cupola, perhaps unnecessarily, perhaps too much architectural, sort of finessing for the sake of its own design, rather than trying wholeheartedly to reduce the height impact into Phillimore Street and from the corner. So I see that there could be possibilities for a modified design that gives everything that corner unit demands, but reflects the fact that it also has to respect the corner building, particularly in that area. I will also say that in terms of the way you view this building, like I said, if you're looking at it from the park hopefully into the future will be far more dense with tree canopy than it is now. And it will be just like viewing it from Pakenham Street, i.e. it will be, you're very much focused on what's immediately in front of you because the building is in a very narrow street. But Phillimore Street is a magical street of the West End because it's the edge of the old West End and the bits of the West End that were added progressively as the harbour was developed, as the river was filled in, and then as the harbour was developed. And it has all of these wonderful leftover spaces where the grid originally stopped and then recommenced again as we filled the river in. And you know those spaces because of the little pocket parks and the plane trees and the way in which you come and go from seeing buildings. It does strike me that there is an opportunity that the architects should be considering to come forward with a landscaping proposal that extends that sense of the sort of continuous pocket parks along Phillimore Street down to this corner as well. So I'm not advocating putting trees in the narrow side streets of the West End, but I would advocate putting trees along Phillimore Street, particularly at key locations, to continue that theme. And if you do that, it completely changes the way in which one would perceive and be able to see the sorts of buildings that do pop up from behind the old. So at this stage, I'll leave it at that. I'll listen to the rest of the debate and make my first version of the decision.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Councillors, you've had lots of time to consider. Councillor Kamada.
I suppose I'll have my two bobs worth here as channeling Councillor Graham. Look, as Leo said down the back, I think it's Leo, I'm not an expert in architecture by any means, but our job is to look at both sides of the argument, which they've both been presented really well. And as Councillor Sullivan said, it's sort of torn on this one in many ways. The restoration work to the existing building is exciting, and it's obvious that I know that Michael and his team do a great job, in so many examples that we've seen in the past. And just one of the terms that's been thrown around recently is modern city, and Fremantle becoming a modern city. And I agree that in certain parts of the city there is opportunities to develop modern buildings that will achieve many of the objectives that will enhance our city into the future. But Michael himself said that the contentious issue is the height, and that's where I find it really difficult to get over the line on this one. And I'm happy to listen to the rest of the debate to see what others think. But at this point, for me, that's a real stumbling block, and I'll find it difficult to support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kamada. Councillors, Councillor Lorver.
I guess I better say something as well, I guess. I won't repeat what Councillor Sullivan and Kamada said. I largely agree with a lot of the points that they raised. This is a high quality design, as the DAC pointed out. It is exciting to see something happening over here, but it is, I just worry about the continual reference to the Quest height throughout this application. And if we approve this one, the next one will say Quest and this, and then the next one will be the precedent for the next one. I really worry about that. So looking at just the general size of these dwellings as well, they are very generous. They'd be very nice places to live. I just can't help but think that there might have been some more scope to pull some of those back and maybe not go quite as high. So I am finding it difficult to support this as well. But I'm happy to listen to the rest of the debate.
The other bit is the public art requirement, and that's mostly going to be done on the inside of the building, so it won't actually, I don't think it'll be accessible to the public. So I just was hoping maybe get a little clarification on that as well. Thank you.
All right, I might get an officer comment about the public art aspect.
Through the chair, the applicant in their application has proposed that to meet the public art policy, the conservation works to the external surface of the building should meet that. We don't agree that that's the intent of the policy. It does bring in heritage works, but to public buildings, meaning city-owned buildings like the town hall, so contributing to works that would be for the public. So our recommendation includes a condition for the contribution to be provided as per the policy.
Thank you for that clarity. Councillors? Councillor Archibald?
Sorry, thank you. I'm aware that the public can't hear us online if we don't speak into these microphones. Look, I, as people know, have opposed additional height in a site that was down in South Terrace, which was for a 6-storey hotel. But to me, that particular proposal, while it did bring hotel accommodation theoretically to the city, didn't contribute enormously in a way that I would see this proposal contributing, certainly on the conservation side of the building. I did go down to the site visit and walked through the interior of the building, and the building, it is an old warehouse, which means it's really not designed for the amenity of people to work in spaces within the building. So the proposed opening up of the building, the introduction of a sort of a light well into the site, having windows in spaces where they can introduce them sensibly, will only make that building much more useful into the future and more viable. So I'm having looked through some of the heritage debate, I kind of land on the side that this is really quite an exciting proposal for this particular building, which is a Federation period building. I applaud the applicant for going to the extent that they have on this building. The issue then does come back to the 2-storey addition. And when I first saw this proposal, I was just looking at it as a proposal. I was very excited by the elements of it, but immediately thought I need to now go and read the West End Conservation Plan. Or policy. There is, the conservation policy was always designed to restrict development so that buildings would not just be pulled down, that the value of the building would be retained into the future. But also, I think, knowing that modifications, sensible modifications, careful modifications would have to be made into the future. And in taking on board some of the comments that Councillor Sullivan has made about the hire of the apartments, I mean, yes, things could be tweaked around the edges, but I kind of, in the end, felt that the building proposal had great integrity in its own right in the way it had been proposed. And yes, it is a prominent site, and perhaps this is an occasion when something a little bit more adventurous might be considered. And I don't think we want to see lots of 2-storey elements being put up anywhere in the West End, but I think very high quality additions can perhaps work. So on balance, I have decided to support the application. I feel that it will be a seriously improved site if a lot of the conservation work is carried out as proposed. Whether the 2 top stories are residential or commercial or whatever they are, I'm not particularly interested in whether it gets used for people to live or whether it gets used for people to work. But on balance, I feel that the work proposed is worth supporting. I also note that the water tower structure, which is also going to be retained and made part of the proposal, and I think that's even higher than the proposed 2 stories on top of the building. So I know that in the past I have, like Councillor Sullivan, not supported a lot of these types of buildings, but I just feel this one might be a very exciting and high quality development to see happen. Thank you.
All right. I'll speak briefly to my own intentions. I will support the officer's recommendation on this one, not necessarily because of more residential in the city. I think there's other ways that we're going about achieving that, but very much along the lines of what Councillor Archibald has said, is this is an incredible opportunity to conserve important, historic and high-profile building. Having walked through it with Councillor Archibald, it is very much adulterated. It's not. There's no sense of the grandeur of that building when you walk through it at the moment, and it is unfortunate, and certainly it is used for temporary office accommodation, but of no real quality or amenity for those people who are there. The height thing obviously was the first thing and probably the last thing in all of our minds in this discussion. It is challenging. Where I land is that, and having been through a lot of planning committee meetings, as many of you have, and sat in this chamber a number of times, we consistently say to get these discretions, you need to deliver quality outcomes. Now, am I the best judge of quality? I'm not sure. But when you've got your design advisory committee saying this is a quality outcome, when you've got sort of broad support from the officers looking at our policies and saying yes, this does meet those conditions for that discretion, then I find it really hard to turn around and then sit in front of other proponents and say, we're not supporting your proposal because you haven't achieved quality. Because when somebody does achieve quality, we don't support it, then what incentive is there for people to come to us with a quality proposal? So I will support it, and when we worry about precedent, the precedent that I would like to be setting is when you come to us and ask for something that does go a little beyond, what we might have considered, make sure it is genuine quality, make sure the design advisory committee has had a look at it and feedback has been incorporated, and you've come to a position that they can support. And in this case, that's what I think has happened. Councillor Lang.
Thanks. I'm going to join the queue of non-architect experts in the room as well. I'm genuinely on the fence with this one for all the reasons mentioned this evening, and I agree with some of the comments made about the sum being greater than the individual building at the West End. Recently walked down the street and consciously looking up to see the impact of the Quest building and the impact of the Notre Dame building, and I typically don't notice those buildings when I'm walking down the street. I guess the challenge with this site is it's on a corner and there's nothing else around, so it can be seen from much, much further away. I also am very concerned about the precedent, and as we're seeing one building being referred to the next building, which allows the next development to go higher and so on. I've had the benefit of seeing the fly-through videos supplied by the architect, and we don't always get those. And the fly-through videos, in particular, one of them sticks in my mind is it's set up at the roundhouse, and when you're at eye level or a standard height, you cannot see this building from the roundhouse. From many of the streets in the West End, you can't see the building, but it's undeniable. Yes, you can see it when you're coming from the train station down Phillimore Street. It does stand out. The points that Councillor Sullivan made about the corner being adjusted, I think they're valid, but I'm also wondering as well, will that make much of a difference given the location of the building? And I'm also thinking in our new council structure at the moment, in committee, we might ask questions of the architect at this point in a planning meeting, but we're under a new setup at the moment, so perhaps that's not possible. genuinely on the fence about this one. I do want to see the site developed. I do trust the architect. Most of us in Fremantle have seen the work the architect does. It is of a high quality, and I believe the building will be restored to a very high quality. It's the precedent and the height and the corner location of it is the only things holding me back at the moment.
Councillors, I will point out that no one has submitted an alternative recommendation for this item, just at this point, for your interest. Councillors, does anyone wish to speak, or can I go to Councillor Thompson and then Councillor Williamson-Wong?
Mine's just a question, Madam Chair. So is there a time priority with this, or is it something that one could defer to the next meeting? Because I listened carefully to Councillor Sullivan, and obviously the one thing that does resonate with me is that issue about the corner, the end unit on the corner, and how it will look from the street. So if that was something that could be dealt with, then I would be able to support this. But at the moment, I'm on the side of probably not supporting it, given that concern.
I'll get the officer comment on that.
Through you, Chair, the city needs to submit its responsible authority report to the DAP by the 5th of January. So tonight really is the opportunity for council to make any comment on this proposal.
Councillor Williamson-Wong.
Yeah, I think it's clear that this is a hard decision for all of us to make. And I agree with everyone that this is a really important building in our city, but it's also a building that I personally and not many people I know have ever had access to. And I think that the restoration works proposed are exemplary, as Councillor Sullivan pointed out. And I've been listening closely to everything tonight because I've also been on the fence and wondering, you know, how this will impact on our community and on our city. And I wanted to thank Councillor Archibald for explaining the intention of the West End policy, that it should be good quality and considered development that we want to allow in our city. And I do consider this to be a good quality and considered development. And when I think about whether this proposal delivers positive or negative outcomes, it feels to me that it will create incredible opportunities for our community to access a high quality heritage building that's been restored. And it's an exciting project. And we are considering this application with such gravity, and there's talk a lot about the precedent. And I think the debate tonight shows the quality of our council whilst this proposal considers the Quest apartment height, I think that from the debate tonight, it's clear many of us are considering the proposal on its own, and approving this development doesn't necessarily mean that it sets precedent that we have to follow for every other decision. I think that the current proposal is exciting, and I do believe that getting this precinct right is important when we consider the evolution of our city, this street and this precinct, especially in terms of what we'll discuss later in the future of Fremantle projects and such.
Thank you, Councillor Williamson-Wong. If there are no further speakers, I'm going to go to Councillor Van Dawson to close, because I'm not seeing any possible amendments on the table either, and they'd have to be, I guess, fairly minor. And you can ask a question. Yeah.
For the sake of clarification for all, and the question really goes to, if the council makes no decision tonight, in the sense doesn't support the officer's recommendation, that would be a non-decision. We wouldn't be able to make a decision tonight. But if the council does that, it will the RAR, the Responsible Authority Report, would simply go to the JDAP as it currently is, unmodified and without council consideration or input. So I just check that that's exactly the scenario. The other question would be, the RAR is required by the 5th of January. Normally the JDAP meetings are a couple of weeks, I think, at least after that, but perhaps the staff could provide a bit more understanding. Clearly, that would still be problematic in terms of a future council meeting.
Okay, so I might go to the CEO on the first point and or to the officer. You tell me.
Yep, I'll answer it. So under our standing orders, if there's a non-decision, council is able to make the exact opposite decision on the table. So if we vote the officer recommendation down, then we'll be able to then apply that we refuse or we don't agree with the application.
Could
I don't understand that. I think you're going to have to spell that out a bit more for Councillor Sullivan and for me. So there is no alternative recommendation drafted with reasons for refusal, etc.
Under our standing orders, so we need to have a decision. You can't have a non-decision. Under our standing orders, if you vote a recommendation down, you can go the exact opposite of it and vote for that. If you vote that down, then we have a non-decision.
Perhaps if I could ask the question a slightly different way. Normally, if we were to vote a recommendation for approval down and we didn't have an alt rec for refusal, we would make a decision that asked the officers to present a refusal recommendation to a subsequent meeting. I think that would be the normal case from memory, but of course time is an issue in this instance. So that's what I'm seeking clarification.
Also my understanding, Councillor Sullivan. Perhaps can we get a view from previous planning committees, because obviously this may have come up in a previous planning committee scenario, and maybe that's what Councillor Sullivan and I are thinking of.
Typically, it would be a referral back to staff on a typical decision. With the way the delegations work, the RAR would, if there's no decision or if there's a referral, it would go to DAP effectively without a council position on the application. And with the report due on the 5th, the DAP meeting would have to be held well in advance of the next scheduled council meeting. So something tonight, whether it's a statement or a minor amendment, then take the CEO's advice on how that would need to happen against the standing orders. But I'm happy to work on drafting something if we're able to.
I'm not exactly clear where we are. Councillor Sullivan, did that give you clarity? Or Councillor Archibald, I noticed you also had your, you wanted to ask a question, I think, or?
I was just thinking that, if the motion doesn't get up, that it's so difficult because it is going to have to be dealt with to go to JDAP. I'm not quite sure how we really manage this one, but I did have a question, but I think Councillor Sullivan solved that problem. Yeah.
All right. Well, perhaps we better get on with the vote on this item. So, Councillor Van Dawson, did you wish to close?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So having listened to the debate this evening and the presentations, I'm comfortable supporting the application and officer's recommendation. In my view, I think it will have a positive contribution to the city, and agree that it does offer something of very high quality, has significant architectural design merit, and thank the architect for their treatment of the heritage and restoration of the building and the adaptive reuse. Yes, in my view, I think it will contribute positively. As discussed, the key issue is the height and impact on the heritage values of the area. Again, in my view, the additional 2 stories is not too much for us to consider. I think it's proportionate to the building. In terms of setting back the corner apartment, in my view, I wouldn't support asking the architect to redesign on that. I think the fact that it is a corner building, it would be difficult to achieve that. The line about not being seen or visible from the street, I do find that one a bit unusual, but appreciate it as part of the city's heritage provisions for the area. the other reasons for supporting it, I do feel when we have heritage experts commenting on a proposal and they all support it, that weighs into my decision as well, given it is heritage that is the issue at hand that we're considering, and it is supported by the State Heritage Office, local heritage, our city's heritage officers, and the Design Review or Design Advisory Committee. And in terms of precedent, I believe the precedent has been set by the Quest building, so I don't think knocking this back, I disagree. Whilst it's another building, it's actually proportionate. Yeah, in my view, the precedent has been set, so I don't think that's a reason to knock this back. I think the fact it does offer the quality and meets the other objectives for the area, yeah, I think that should outweigh that. That's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Van Dawson. All right, well, we're going to put the officer's recommendation to a vote. All those in favour? Councillors Van Dawson, Williamson Wong, Lang, Fitzharding and Archibald in favour. And against? Councillors Thompson, Sullivan, Kamada and Lawver against. So it's carried. And we now all need to go and read the standing orders again, I think. Okay. Well, that was a lot. We are going to move on to the... You're all clear on... Yep, got names, numbers. Yep, good. We're going to move on to item 22 on the agenda, which is the late item that came through. So I've still got 2 speakers left in the gallery for that one. And they are Lisa Barnes and Gina Blakemore, in whichever order they would like to go.
Hi everyone, my name's Lisa Barnes and I'm the co-convener of South Fremantle Precinct. The precinct was formed 10 years ago and there's 4,500 people in our group, which is growing every week by 40 people roughly. And we screen them quite rigorously, so they are actually all people. And we've just recently found out about the South Beach toilets likely not being approved for funding before Christmas and for construction to start in February. When this was posted up on our group and on Freo Massive, it obviously did attract quite a lot of attention from the community. This has been going on for quite a long time. It is really disappointing to hear that there's no suitable tenderers in budget for the construction of the facilities. And it's also very unfortunate that previous facilities were demolished before 2 years ago. In hindsight, it may have been prudent to remove the damaged roof sections and leave the remainder of the facilities intact. And this would have left much better facilities than what we are dealing with now and at a much less cost. Also, I noticed a few weeks ago that the external showers were removed from the adjacent parklands, and these were highly popular and utilised by families and others without needing to access the portable facilities we now have. So that's also quite unfortunate, and we also don't have any barbecues at the beach. So South Beach is looking quite poor and unloved at the moment. Won't talk about the cat bus. So I understand that the tenderers have come in over budget. However, and I know that the city has thought that there is really no value in doing value management, but I do think it is worth considering value management with the contractors and looking for some options of cheaper materials and products to meet the design brief without potentially having an architect's favourite price tag on them. Any reduction in cost does significantly reflect on other on-costs in a contract. I used to write up contracts, so I used to write up to contract submissions. I know how these things work, usually as percentage margins. So any reduction in cost will potentially significantly reduce the overall price tag. And I'd hazard a guess that any suitable alternatives, any redesign of the facilities would probably take a number of months, and I very much doubt we'd be able to come in within that construction timeframe that was hoped for. The other option that Ian Kerr mentioned earlier this year was to spread the cost over several years, not just one. So I think that the council should look at any other viable alternatives to keep this project going and show South Beach the love that it deserves. Thank you.
Thank you. And Gina Blakemore.
Good evening, Gina Blakemore, South Fremantle Precinct co-convener. I participated in the South Beach Place Plan meetings. They seemed to go well. At last, it seems decisions were being made by members of the community, the Indigenous community, swimming groups, all the different groups that use the beach. And we were all very excited after doing that we'd come to a conclusion that suited everybody and would work well in our community. I'm here to speak for the South Fremantle community because we get a lot of feedback from the precinct. We're really disappointed with the outcome to further delay the toilets being built. This really affects our community. We really feel that South Fremantle is being forgotten and we don't understand why. We're a major part of the Fremantle and should be included in upgrades for the future too. Our businesses rely on visitors and tourists coming to our community to keep our local businesses and economy strong. South Beach is a major destination of Fremantle. We don't understand why Fremantle Council demolished buildings before the building is put out to tender. There are no facilities for the disabled, babies, elderly, families and people in general visiting the beach. The broken barbecues at South Beach are sending groups who dumpster dive at South Fremantle Shopping Centre, bring trolley loads of rotten meat, which the dogs eat and get sick and have to go to the vet. As they're left all over the ground and barbecue, we have needles left around the picnic table and the toilets, people using drugs and drinking in front of the toddlers and parents in the playground. Our homeless community needs somewhere to cook. We need more barbecues. I do thank you for the police camera on the trailer. That has helped. So probably best to keep going with the build of the toilets and spread the cost of the build over many years. We can't see building costs getting cheaper yet. Public hygiene and toilet amenities seem more important at this stage. It's actually come down to a point of urgency. Please continue, or we implore you to please continue building the toilets. So many groups settled on this design for our South Fremantle community. If you delay now, we can see another couple of years added onto the building process if you start again. Our community desperately needs this amenity and we can't wait that long. On a finishing note, I wish you all a great festive season and a happy new year.
Thank you, Gina, and same to you. All right, so I will ask for someone to move the officer's recommendation. Yep, Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Lawver. I thought I might ask the director to make a bit of a statement as to kind of how do we find ourselves here and what options were open to us, and perhaps elaborate a little bit on what the plan is from here.
Thank you, through the chair. So I think the first thing to highlight is this is a process that we have to follow, tendering to market. It is market-led. It's not something that we decide on in terms of which tenderers or which contractors submit tenders into us. So we're at the behest of the market. Sorry. Oh, sorry. And yeah, it's unfortunate that only 2 contractors did return tenders on this occasion. We use an architect and a quantity surveyor to prepare the documentation. We have a robust risk management framework that we follow, and it does consider the risk associated with tendering and pricing and everything that's associated with that. On this occasion, the two tenderers that submitted tenders, the gap was just too big. Sometimes you can value engineer a relatively small gap down, and we did anticipate that we might need to consider that, but this was significantly higher. So in terms of timelines and what we propose to do, we'll review the design and the methodology and some of the construction details. We think there are opportunities to speed construction up. Part of the current design does have quite a long lead-in time and does cause us a few issues in terms of the timeline. So we're going to review that and look to see if we can shorten that or look for a better option. We want to try and maintain the quality. We're conscious of the feedback the community have given us about the use and the function of the facility, but we will look at the scope and what can be included and what may be omitted. There are some challenges around the change in place acquittal timeline that we'd have to renegotiate. We can do that. We'd have to have a look at that. But our endeavours would be to get out as soon as possible back to the marketplace and perhaps take a different route and look at the construction methodology and recover as much time as possible. So we take all those things on board. We're conscious of winter and building through winter, but we'd hope to try and aim to at least get the new facilities up for next summer. In the interim, we've committed to take another look at the temporary facilities, the toilets, the showers, changing facilities and the barbecues. So we'll do that in the short term, and we'll try and make sure that we try and at least make it a little bit easier in the interim period.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson, you moved this item?
I did, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, look, I agree with the officer's recommendation. Obviously, I'm moving it. And it's not the first time we have rejected tenders on a number of items over the years, probably many times, in an effort to get a better price. And usually that comes with a caveat that you go out and you negotiate with the lowest tenderer. However, I think in this case, the only concern I would have with the officer's recommendation, while I support it, is that we did think about the idea of delegating to the CEO the authority to, in fact, move the design proposal forward. So I would suggest that a councillor might consider putting in an amendment to that to actually give the authority to the CEO, so that could move forward without necessarily having to come back to council for further decisions. So, but having said that, I fully support the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Lorber, did you want to speak as seconder? Nope. Okay, councillors. I'm sure we've got some South Ward councillors who'd like to say something. Sorry, Coastal Ward. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. I might just ask a couple of questions before I speak to the main item.
Absolutely.
The first question is, this is the officer's recommendation. The question I have, was there an alternative recommendation that would have sought a budget review to basically pay what the cost of the building was from the lowest tenderer? Because presumably that is an option. That's the first question.
I think the CEO will respond to that.
There was not consideration of providing a budget outcome for the lowest tenderer due to some complications in the tender evaluation process.
So just more as a general question, I guess, the exceedance above budget could be handled by a budget review in normal circumstances. Is that correct?
Certainly, council could consider doing that, and maybe even value engineering down a little bit as well, up to 10% of the tender estimate.
and presumably there is also nothing stopping us, even if this motion is approved as it is, to still increasing the budget significantly to cover most of the difference.
We are anticipating that the proposal that would come back to council would require some budget as well.
I am asking these questions because I think this information needs to be read into the public record. So the last of the questions goes to the change in place facility, which is partly grant funded. And I think along the way we've sort of got to the theory in our heads that the grant was going to cover the cost of the actual facility. So my question is, do we have an estimate for now how much the change in place facility is going to cost? I presume that's the right word. And also how much the city is paying or potentially paying for it and how much the grant funding is paying for it.
Thank you. Through the chair, very roughly, I would estimate the change in place facility, or that element of the build, is about $300,000. The change in place grant is $150,000.
So just on that change in places grant, was it always a 50-50 thing, or was there an expectation that the state was essentially building that part of the building by giving us the grant?
I'll just get you to pop up to the microphone. Thanks.
Thank you. Through the chair, the grant was $150,000 from Department of Communities, and the city had a contribution of, off the top of my head, it was $140,000 towards that.
Thank you. All right, Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. I'll make my comments now. You know, for a lot of my time this round on council, I've been effectively apologising to the South Fremantle community, particularly, about the state of the change rooms at South Beach. It's been going on for 15 years. I don't have to do that anymore because those change rooms aren't there. They've been demolished. The words incompetent were used quite a lot on social media today. And they're not words I necessarily share. And in any case, as an elected member on the council, that would be inappropriate for me to actually use them. But I do feel absolutely that the process has been unbelievably underwhelming and a collective indictment about the way in which we have gone about replacing or responding to the need to replace these buildings. We have exhausted a 15-year time frame. So we can't pretend that we didn't know that we had to replace these buildings a considerable time back. Most of the councillors in this chamber are not necessarily responsible for that because you weren't here 15 years ago. But the reality is the collective way in which we have dealt with the need to replace these toilets or to deliver functional toilets, I should say, change rooms, has been one that has really let all of ourselves and the community down. And it's, you know, I get to the point now where I feel we're in this between the rock and the hard place, because the reality is, in terms of the amount of extra money we would need to find to build that level of quality and that level of amenity and that level of design, the extra money that we would need to find to do that right here, right now, is actually about the same amount of money that we will forego if we end up not using all of that staff time and all of that consultant time and all of that community time that we've already expended to get to the point where we are right now. because that's hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of work. So we are in a position where we can almost throw away hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of work, 700,000, something like that, or we can try and find a significant additional amount of money. And my sense is that we need to do, I think there is a balancing act between how much of the first that you do and how much of the second that you do. And I think that quite honestly, a hand on the heart, we need to do a significant budget review to get this project up and running and built in the time frame that is required. That doesn't necessarily mean that the recommendation is wrong. But I want to state really clearly that we can't chop massive elements out of the proposal that took so long to get the community to say, yes, that's what we need. We can't now start saying, well, you know, our equality of access policy no longer applies because we need to, you know, drop a few toilets, or we can forego the changing places facility because the state's not funding it enough, or whatever. We need to not significantly erode the amenities that are needed at South Beach. And that is what I'm most concerned about now. So while I feel absolutely the need that we collectively, and if you don't feel that, me personally, need to apologise to the community because we have failed in terms of the delivery of a project that was recognised 15 years ago. And I don't want to be in a position where I have to apologise again because we've then eroded the absolute basic amenities that people from both South Fremantle and the region expect to have at a facility like South Beach. And bear in mind, you know, there are councillors in this chamber who already and have already been saying, you know, we're not even servicing all of the beaches with decent toilets. In fact, now, when you think about it, the only beach that we actually have responsibility for that has decent public toilets is Leighton Beach. I wouldn't describe the toilet facilities at Port Beach as being sort of something that we would crow about. They're certainly better than the non-existence of toilets at Bathers Beach or the Dog Beach and South Beach, all of the other areas that we have responsibility for. So please, councillors, if we make this decision tonight, expect to have to make a budget review decision to get these facilities funded and completed. Yes, we might need to learn from the processes as well. We should be reviewing why we got ourselves 15 years later into a situation where we have no decent toilets at South Beach, and we have the potential for it still sliding off the rails for some time. So I know that you won't appreciate my criticism, my collective criticism of all of us, but I think it had to be said tonight, and I urge you to find the resources needed to get this project back on track.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Councillors. Councillor Lang.
Not going to repeat what Councillor Sullivan has just said, but I'm also thinking about lessons learned here and the last meeting we had in this chamber, where we're introducing shark barrier at Bathers Beach. And if what Councillor Sullivan is right in saying that this is a 15-year process, maybe we should be applying some of the lessons learned from this and hopefully taking some of the IP we have on change rooms and applying that to budget considerations and designs for new facilities at Bathers Beach. So we're not looking at another 15-year break before adding amenity at Bathers Beach, because I'm sure now the team are very well versed with change rooms and the process about building and creating new change rooms. So maybe we could hit the ground running with that at Bathurst Beach.
Thanks, Councillor Lang. I might just make a few points myself to respond as well to Councillor Sullivan, who, broadly I agree with. I mean, I'd make the point that nobody is happy about where we are. Officers are not happy. Elected members are not happy. Nobody is happy, but it is where we are. I did have a bit of a wry smile. South Fremantle is being forgotten about, left out. It's not South Fremantle's beach. It's everybody's beach. It's Hilton's beach. We don't have a different beach. We come to South Beach. It's Beaconsfield's beach. It's, Hammy Hill and beyond, and it's everyone's beach, and we're all feeling it. And nobody is happy with the current situation. Officers, I think, were extremely unhappy to evaluate those tenders, see where they'd ended up, and have to come to us and say, there's no good way out of this. And there is no good way out of this. I do applaud this council and the council that immediately preceded it for getting on with asset improvement. Like, it has been a genuine focus at looking at assets and saying we need to do something about the health of our assets. They are old, they are degraded, they need to be fixed up. And we've been picking them off one by one, and I'm really glad that South Freo, it was essential that South Fremantle's change rooms were high on that list because they were no longer safe. So we did get on with it, but we got on with it at the absolute worst time in the market. And I think if you ask anyone who's doing a construction project at the moment, and particularly ones like this, Public Works, that have all of the constraints around how they're procured and all of that, it's not a good time at all. And escalation is a massive issue, which is why we get QS. And I think, unfortunately, the QS in this case did not excel. Anyway, maybe it did exceed, but not excel. So we need to find a solution. I think, for us, we go back to officers and say, how do we fix this? How do we go forward? And how do we do that in the quickest way? And the advice here and the recommendation is to reject these tenders so we can have another look at construction methodology and see if that is one of the reasons that this has come, in at such a big number. I'm optimistic that by reviewing that we might get a quicker build time. So what we lose on the tendering, we might gain back on the build time. But I also agree with Councillor Sullivan. Do it once and well. We've seen how long these things can be drawn out for, far too long. So when we actually do them, I think we have to do them. We do them once and well. In the meantime, and the most immediate priority is a quick response to what can we do to improve amenity right now. As I stand at the showers every morning, listening to people complain about them and hoping to God that I'm not recognised, I know it's a problem. I too hug the shower pole in order to get some water on my head. It is, and our team are aware of it, and knowing, I guess, where we are now, the best thing we can do is look at how do we provide interim amenity so we can do this job once and well. And I don't envy the officers. I think they've been through a heck of a process to get to here. They, I think, are under no illusion as to how much of a priority this is, and not just for coastal ward councillors, but for all of us. So I agree with Councillor Sullivan. I'd be very surprised if we're not having conversations about this in terms of budget, but we do need to get value for money. We're spending your money, we need to get value for money. If the view is there's ways we can get better value for our money, then I think we should go down that path, and I'll support the officer's recommendation for that reason. Councillors. Whoa, okay. I will put this one to a vote then. All those in favour? And against? Councillor Sullivan against, and that's carried. Okay, thank you for coming along, and hopefully there'll be some better news in the not too distant future. Okay, councillors, I'm going to go back to the agenda now as printed, given that we've covered all items that I understand people are in the gallery for. If you were in the gallery for a particular item and we have not yet spoken about it, I'd love it if you could raise your hand and I'll get agendas and minutes to talk to you and find out what it is that you're hoping to stay for. All good? All right. Excellent. That's next up. Fabulous. Got them? Yep. Sorry, we'll just wait while we make sure everyone's got what they need. All right, so that's the Heritage Review. Did you spoke already, I think. Did you wish? Oh, did you wish to speak on that item? Okay, that's fine. Listening is good too. Absolutely. Yeah, completely. You're right to be here to hear what we've got to say, and we'll come on to that item right now. So do I have a mover for the officer's recommendation for C2 31212? Councillor Sullivan, and a seconder, Councillor Van Dawson. All right, Councillor Sullivan to open.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'll welcome Mrs. Coleman to the chamber. I'm pretty confident that the land that the Coleman family owned, the sisters, would be largely unaffected by being inside a heritage precinct, and will be, in fact, South Fremantle being a heritage precinct probably escalates the value of your land as a desirable place to live and do business in significantly. It's part of what makes South Fremantle such a great place. I certainly welcome the officer's report, and as I've mentioned to councillors, there is one aspect which I think there probably needs to be a little bit more emphasis on, and perhaps it can happen when it comes back from the consultation, and that is the horse heritage issues. As you know, there was a proposal some while back to try and get a state listing for the horse heritage area in South Fremantle, and it's very important that we continue through with that for some reason, and there's a lot of confusion at both in the state government and I think in our organisation. For some reason, that state level listing was set aside, but there are still people in the Heritage Council who are scratching their heads as to why, and would happily initiate that proposal. But I would like to see a little bit more emphasis in our heritage area review assessment in terms of the importance of the horse training. It's not just horse training, but horse training and horse activity in the South Fremantle area, because there are a number of stables still in existence, some still running, but the whole precinct was hugely influenced by horse activity in the early years, and there are lots of remnant buildings that have that importance within them. Other than that, I guess we're proceeding to the next stage of the review, and you know, obviously that's what we need to do. So, put that to you.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Councillors, do we have any further comment on this one? Thank you, Councillor Williamson-Wong.
I just wanted to echo Councillor Sullivan's points. Growing up with a great grandma who'd grown up in South Fremantle back in the day, we had lots of horse stories. So yeah, I think that comes through, and it came through when I was door knocking, the importance of acknowledging that in our heritage.
Thank you. All right, if we don't have any further comments, I'll put this to a vote. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. Thank you. All right, so That brings us to the next item, which is C231213, the future of Fremantle. So I'll look for someone to move a recommendation.
Madam Chair, I've got a point of order, or a procedural motion, actually.
Sure.
So my apologies to fellow councillors and anyone watching or listening online, but I'm going to have several procedural motions on this that we probably need to deal with before it's moved. Because I submitted 4 separate amendments to this item that I found out when they were published last night that each one was determined to be a alternate recommendation instead. They were all intended to work together in the event that they were approved. You know, the multicolored text document I sent earlier kind of demonstrates that. And as alternate recommendations, you know, they can only actually be considered until one of them is approved. So if I had really intended to do an alternate recommendation, I would have really done
Councillor Lorver, if you're moving a
differently.
procedural motion, it needs to be a
Yep.
procedural motion.
So given all of that, I'd like to move a procedural motion under 10.1 of the meeting procedures. I understand it with a simple majority vote that we can basically convert what was deemed as alt rec back into an amendment. And so I'll wait to see if there's a seconder for the procedural motion before I discuss it.
So you're moving a procedural motion under 10.1. Which subclause?
Part F.
And in relation to which ruling?
I'm sorry, what was that?
In relation to what?
In relation to the red text on the document I sent around earlier today, that was sent through as an amendment, but it's listed.
So I'll read that out just for clarity for elected members. So that 10.1F is that the ruling of the presiding member be disagreed with. So I haven't made any rulings, so I'm not quite sure what this procedural motion relates to.
Madam Chair, can I seek a ruling as to whether Councillor Lorver's proposed amendments are to be considered amendments or to be considered as the latter?
My ruling would be aligned with the officer's recommendation that they be considered alternative recommendations, and that's based on the view that the officers are clear in their intention when they write their officer's recommendation. If they have a view that the intention is different from the intention of their recommendation, they would characterise that as an alternative recommendation. In this case, this is what officers have recommended, if you like, and so I do rule that those are alternative recommendations rather than amendments. I'm also aware that officers have prepared amendments that it tries to capture the intent of some of the alternative recommendations, and I certainly would be prepared to consider those as amendments.
All right, this is a bit unique, so I'd like to just move a procedural motion under 10.1 on that ruling, that for the red text on the document that I sent around, that it is an amendment, it is not an alternate recommendation.
So there were 4 different amendments that were, in your words, amendments without alternative recommendations that were circulated, I believe. So I consider those all alternative recommendations. So I think what you're suggesting is that my ruling on that is disagreed with across all 4 of those alternative recommendations. That's correct? Yeah. All right. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Lang? All right, we'll put that to a vote.
Oh, can I speak to it?
No.
As a procedural motion,
no,
you can
it's
speak
procedural.
for 5 minutes?
No.
Yeah. Under the procedural motion, the mover can speak for up to 5 minutes.
Councillor Thompson looks like he's... We're going to pull up the standing orders. There you go. Everyone's getting a great lesson tonight. All right, you can speak for 5 minutes. Is anyone else allowed to speak before we come to that? I'm just checking. There's something about 3 minutes as well. Seconder may speak for 3 minutes. Anyone else? You really sure? All right. Okay, good times. Councillor Lorber, your clock is ticking.
Great, thank you. I probably won't need all 5 minutes just because this is just simply a motion to see if we can potentially consider some items that were put forward as amendments. And my apologies, I didn't actually sleep very well last night because I was thinking about how I could approach this, because I did put those forward as amendments and was pretty shocked to see them as alternate recommendations. So basically, each one of these seeks to just add some more to the debate tonight. You know, we got this new position 5 days ago, and we didn't actually have a chance to discuss or you know, talk about what we might want to see. So this is not about what's in those potential amendments. This is just about the ability for us to have a discussion. So you know, it's yeah. So I just think that, you know, there are other amendments that were approved that, you know, actually, you know, some of them add new critical issues. Some of them actually change it to an interim position. There's not substantially different from what I put forward in its context. The report itself does have commentary, and some of the amendments that I put forward has some commentary. That's fine. But again, this is not about whether or not you necessarily would agree with what's in those. It's just about our ability to actually have a discussion about them. So,
Councillor Lang.
I seconded this for the debate, but also because I got caught up in the same piece. I didn't submit an alternate recommendation. I just submitted a note I wanted to add on to the end of the officer's recommendation. So I don't know why I was also tagged under the alternate recommendation.
I don't think I can say anything, but I'm even more confused now because of the... Anyway. All right, so we will put that to a vote. All those in favour of the procedural motion as moved by Councillor Lorber and seconded by Councillor Lang. Okay, so that's Councillors Lorber, Lang and Kamada for, and sorry, Williamson, Wong and Sullivan for, and against. Okay, so that's carried. So there are 4 different alternative recommendations that are up, I guess, as amendments, potentially. How, I have no idea how we're going to deal with those. So we're going, yeah. So we're going to move the officer's recommendation to begin with, and then we're going to work through the amendments in order, I suppose. All right. So can I get a move of the officer's recommendation? Councillor Archibald.
Thank you.
And hang on, seconder, Councillor Van Dawson.
Thank you. I was just going to say, I thought I'd move it, given that I wasn't one of the people who put up an amendment or an alternate motion. But it has been seconded now. So just in moving it, I just wanted to say that my feeling was I was very pleased to see Councillor Sullivan put in his amendment the word interim, because I do feel that a good deal of what we might say about some of the proposals we still have yet to more fully explore. And some of the issues that have been raised by Councillor Sullivan and Councillor Williamson Wong and Councillor Lorber and Councillor Lang are all in my mind, points that do need to be more fully fleshed out in the future. So for me, in moving this, I think it would be good to view it as an interim position, and that when we regroup as a council in February, that we do get another opportunity where we might discuss more some of the issues that we feel would wrap around this project if it were to proceed. So with that, I'm happy to move it and have it seconded.
Thank you. Councillor Van Dawson. A seconder.
I don't have much to add. Thank you. I'm recommendation and appreciate some of the amendments proposed, and yeah, look forward to discussing and resolving it, that we can put something forward. Thanks.
Thanks. Councillor Archibald, I'll get you to just turn your mic off. Councillor Lang.
Yeah, I've just got a question to kick things off. And in the summary, the opening paragraph, the sentence is, in doing so, it also seeks to adjust the city's previous position that container freight should remain in Fremantle. So that's what it says in the report in the summary, that it seeks to adjust the city's previous position, which was August 2018, that container freight should remain in Fremantle. However, in the recommendation, we're not asked to vote on adjusting our previous position. So that's why I've moved the note. So the question is the intent of the recommendation to adjust the city's previous position, or is that just something within the report? Because we're not asked to vote to change the position.
Yep.
Thank you for the question through the chair. Yes, I can understand some ambiguity around that, but I would. So I'm just trying to get to the recommendation there. I would argue that the recommendation one is possibly the most important part of this recommendation. There are going to be many iterations and changes over the next 10 years or so. Where this is fundamentally different from where we were in 2018 is recommendation number one, where we welcome, and also can I suggest, I do like the idea of that interim edition, but welcoming the planning work where we engage with government to look at what might happen to that port land should it go to Kwinana is fundamentally a different position to where we were in 2018. And I think that's what we're really trying to seek here, that rather than say we don't support it, we want the port to stay, then we shouldn't be going to the workshops. We should not be engaging in the planning, because our position would be we don't want it to go. So I think where I'm trying to move this to is, should the decision for the port be relocated, that we remain engaged and we participate in the planning process for what might go in North Fremantle, with all the caveats around it being job positive, about the transport planning. So that is where I think the fundamental change is from where we were 2018. It may not be explicit in that recommendation one, and I think that's possibly where.
Yeah, thanks for answering the question. Yeah, and I guess that's my interpretation, that in point one of the recommendation, it says that, I guess the key bit is should the port move, and I can see both things running in parallel. I can see this recommendation is fine by me, should the port move, but the way I'm interpreting the report and recommendation, it says that we still maintain the position from 2018. Should the port move, here's our wish list. But the preference is still to maintain the working container port. That's how I've read this, and so that's why I asked that question.
So you are clear now what the officer's recommendation intention is, and that, I mean, to me that answers the question as well as to why, as a alternative recommendation, there is reaffirming the 2018 position. So.
I am still confused. If the intention was to not have Fremantle as a working container port, it should have that. And that's why I wanted to include the note at the end of the recommendation to note that our position is still to keep the working container port. And the recommendation we have here is to say, however, if it does go, here are the things and the checks and balances we want in place. But I read this and the recommendation and the report as saying that 2018 decision is still in play, and that's what I'm voting on this evening. 2018 is still in play, and this is almost a plan B.
Look, I guess from an officer perspective, the August 2018 resolution was made, bearing in mind we did not know any process moving forward to talk about what happens if there is no container port in Fremantle. this is the process that does start to talk about that. So August 2018 resolution was the fact that there was nothing else to fill the vacuum of a conversation. Yep. So we are starting to nuance that. And that's what this recommendation is starting to do. Yep. If there is a desire that we would prefer to keep a container port in Freo, I think council should state that very clearly. Yep.
Councillor Lorber.
Yeah, just a quick question, but it's just on the reason for this being before us is wanting to have a position that isn't in conflicts. We can participate in the meetings with future Freo, but has our current position been an issue? Because the mayor's, you've been on the committee for several years now. I'm just wondering, has it been a block or a hindrance to you for doing the work that the Future Fremantle Committee has actually done?
I'll address that when I speak. Do you want to speak now, or okay? I'll speak now. That's fine.
Can I ask a question just before you
yeah.
do? If we're going to go through this process tonight, where each councillor gets to speak once, it's not going to work. So we have said previously that we would suspend a sufficient amount of standing orders to try and workshop this. There are way too many amendments and conversations, each of which
you want to move to suspend standing orders, Councillor Sullivan?
We're going to need to do that because we can see where it's going to head.
All right. So procedural motion to move to suspend as much of standing orders as is, whatever it's called. Suspend the operation of clause 7.8, speaking twice, under the meeting procedures policy to provide an open forum for further discussion on item 13. And limit the number of times a member may speak on the item to be no more than twice. Are we okay with that? Bearing in mind there will be an awful lot of amendments on which people can speak as well.
Someone can speak.
I think it would be advisable if we want to keep debate orderly, but
well,
you're
moving it. I would move it without it because I'm more interested in outcome than.
Yep. All right. Do we have a second of that? I heard someone and I saw someone. Everyone, Councillor Lang. All right. Yes, you have. So it's a procedural motion, so you can speak for 5 minutes.
I don't think I need to.
Okay. All right. All of those in favour of that procedural motion, and that's carried unanimous. And against, Councillor Thompson. I was waiting. Okay. All right. So that's carried. Okay. So I think I was going to speak, Councillor Sullivan, you were moving procedural motion. That's about where we were, yeah? Okay, so I guess my concern and why I would appreciate some clarity on this is right now there is no decision to move the container port. There's no formal decision of government that says we are moving the container port. There's a hell of a lot of work being done. That work is being publicly discussed, but there is no decision. There will be a decision in the future to move it or not to move it. The current position is that at that point in time, as the spokesperson for council, I will oppose that move. That's how I interpret it. In which case, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't oppose the move and say, but it would be really great if you could invest all this money in our economy to grow a new economy here and to create a job positive future and actually solve some of the transport issues in North Fremantle and do all of these other things that we've highlighted as really important. But by the way, I oppose moving the port. It's a ridiculous position to hold. So to me, it is one or the other. You know, it is either we stand the whole way through and say, no, we're against it, it's bad, stop doing it. By the way, I think it'll happen anyway, regardless of our position. You know, we're not a decision maker in this. Or, and going back to what the CEO said, back in 2018, and I was on council in 2018, there was no plan. There was no plan for what would happen to Fremantle. And the reason that we took that some, you know, I won't speak to other people's reasons. The reasons I supported taking such a strong position was until you tell us the economics, the you know, the benefits, everything that this will mean for Fremantle, we shouldn't support it until you have done this work, which, you know, and I applaud the council for taking such a hard position, because essentially what it did was it forced the work of Future of Fremantle to say we need to have some consideration for what happens to this land, and we need to do that consideration as an input to the decision that we're going to take on moving the port. And had we have not taken such a hard line, it's quite possible that that work would not have happened. Westport work would have carried on, and, you know, we would have still been in the dark here. So strategically, for me, it was a really good position to have. Leading up to a Westport decision, it will put us in a very interesting position if we are then continuing to have a position that says we fundamentally oppose everything that's being said here. So in my mind, there are two clear paths, you know, and I think we've got elected members, you know, who probably scatter themselves all across the spectrum of those two paths. There is don't move the port, or participate in the discussion around what happens if the port moves, because you can't be part of that discussion if you're opposing the very thing that's going on. So I hope that clarifies, and I would hope, and if people wish to put some words in the officer's recommendation that make it absolutely clear that this is us participating in that process going forward and getting what we can for the people of Fremantle through that process, I'd be very open to words to that effect. I very much support some of the amendments around some of the things we have highlighted both in those workshops and in other council decisions as being critical around North Fremantle, around connectivity, around traditional owner governance and recognition. I absolutely think all of those amendments are really good, and they reinforce positions that we've taken on a bunch of different things, but we cannot have our cake and eat it too with this one. Okay, Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. I mean, essentially, I think it's a good place to start, because that is one of the alt-recs was essentially Councillor Lang's proposal to reinforce the original decision. I'm a little bit surprised at it, I've got to say. I did not read this report in the way that's just been described by the officers and by the mayor. I read the report as that we are a progressive council that is wishing to work hand in glove with the state government, who are making a really difficult decision as to whether or not to move the port. We're a council that welcomes the fact that we have a state government that has recognised our concerns from 2018 and that has put in parallel to that decision-making process to relocate the port a process that allows us as a community, as a state, to consider what happens if that decision is made. We're not that decision maker. We don't have to be one thing or the other. This is not black and white and that's it. The two issues, the two processes are not mutually exclusive. And that's not our decision as to whether the port relocates or not. But I can still have an opinion, and I can still want to make sure that if it is going to be moved, that the fullness of the debate and the evidence that is put forward, the business case, if you like, is presented for everyone in the state to see and understand. And I'm not going to die in a ditch if the state makes that decision. What's the point of dying in a ditch over it? I'm not going to die in a ditch over it. And I absolutely welcome their invitation to be a part of this. And so I don't understand why there is this suggestion that we can only do one or the other. And I would put it to the council that we don't have to do what Councillor Lang was sort of proposing. We don't have to come out and say, let's reiterate 2018. But we also don't have to say we're going to completely ignore that now because the only thing that mattered from the 2018 decision was that we got the Future of Fremantle process up and running. So yes, it's achieved that, but we don't need to, we don't need to completely rescind at that earlier position, because I think there is still some merit in being curious as to the business plan for relocation of the port. I would also argue that not only should we be curious about it, we should be curious about the fact that it's the container port that they're proposing to relocate, and not the ro-ro and the bulk waste, bulk cargo, the live sheep trade, or any of those other things at this stage. So until they're actually dealing with all of those matters, I don't necessarily want to be in a position to make a rescinding motion virtually of where we were in 2018. So I would suggest collectively that we don't need to make this a big issue. We don't need to, as I said, scream from the rooftops and reiterate everything from 2018. But we can note and we can welcome the process of the Future of Fremantle process, because it's not exclusive to do both. Of course we should be part of this process, and of course we should be commenting on it. There's no reason to completely stamp out a position of the past, unless the council wants to do that. If the bulk of the elected members in this room want to completely rescind 2018, then go for it. Do it transparently. So I would simply suggest that the sort of subtle wordings of things like welcomes. I don't have a problem with welcoming it. It doesn't mean that we don't. It means that we welcome the Future of Fremantle process, because it's not the process that is deciding whether the port relocates or not. And in fact, it's part of the decision-making process for that, because they want to know what happens to the port lands if they relocate. That should be part of their business case. So I don't see them as mutually exclusive. I don't understand why you do, Mayor Fitzharding, and I just think we need to tweak the wording so that any concern that we are ditching 2018 is put to us one side without screaming it from the rooftops.
Councillor Archibald.
Thank you. This doesn't mean I'm finishing my debate, I hope. I just wanted to make a quick comment on some of what Councillor Sullivan said, because for me, the 2018 decision, I supported that, as was said, that in the absence of any plan going forward. And the concerns that this council had, which was the premise of putting together the 2018 motion, was that they were concerned that if there was no plan, that the removal of all of the jobs and the removal of a good number of maritime activities would be detrimental to the city. I agree. I think we still have those concerns. We do want to see jobs, and the project claims that it's going to be job positive, and we do want to see maritime activities, and it claims it's going to look at those things. I mean, my overall feeling is this project, which is why I liked your interim word, because to me that kind of underpins it. To me, there's so far to go on this project. There is such, we can't make decisions for people in 20 years' time. And my feeling is, like you've been saying, getting the road network straight, getting the beach reserves preserved, getting those fundamental aspects that shouldn't vary no matter which model we're dealing with, whether it's 1, 2 or 3 or whatever scenario. They to me are critical issues that we can have some strong influence on now, and keep reiterating that we do want this, if all this does happen, we do want it to be job positive, not negative, and we do want maritime activities. The other thing I was just going to mention was that I did attend the launch of the Blue Economies annual report, and they were talking a lot about how they could better position themselves should all of this go ahead, and the opportunities that might come with, you know, more real estate being available so that they could develop maritime related activities out of Fremantle. And I've said this in some of the workshops, and I'm sure some of my colleagues here have too, that we've got a long way to go to fully explore how those opportunities can be really well optimised in Fremantle for the benefit of Fremantle. And so I don't see anything in the future of Fremantle scenarios that gives us any real insight into how this might happen. And I think that the work of the Blue Economy Group and others is going to be really critical to underpin that, so that these things can be considered into the future. So for me, the officer's recommendation, I was in some email dialogue with Councillor Williamson Wong and Councillor Sullivan, just putting in the words that I've just been mentioning about making sure that it is job positive and making sure we do have maritime related activities, because I do think if that disappeared from the scene, it would be a very boring city. They really have been fundamental. Whether or not it's containers, I am concerned about the future of the road network and rail network if a container operation stays there. To be honest, I think the container operations will change into the future, and the most likely thing is that it will shift. But to me, that's also another opportunity that containers came in the 1960s. Maybe they'll go in the, the 2030s or 40s, and other things will happen. So for me, I really want to make sure that we can optimise seriously the maritime-related activities that can come into the city. So I just want to make the point that they were the two issues that we really fundamentally formed that motion around, that we didn't want to see this industry removed and nothing carry out in its place.
Councillor Lang.
Thanks. I agree with some of the other comments you made as well, Madam Mayor, on we don't know what's happening in the future, and the new proposed port hasn't even been assessed by the EPA. It's not even on their desk yet, so we don't even know. They're still compiling research. They don't even know what the impacts may or may not be on Coburn Sound. So it really is a long way away. And for me to say that I'm ready to move the port without environmental studies even being completed is certainly premature. Just to clarify, you have in front of you an alternate recommendation. It was not intended to be an alternate recommendation, just to clarify.
Are you moving the amendment?
And based on that, I do want to move a minor amendment just to clarify the points that I had in my questions previously, to make the note. And I was just going to say I would like to move the entire, what is written as an alternate recommendation, just as my note. But if Councillor Sullivan wishes to chop that down and make it to say something like Council still supports the decision from August 2018 or words to that effect, I'd be more than happy. I just want to have that clarified, because I do not believe that position comes through clearly in the recommendation. And as Councillor Sullivan mentioned, I think it is not mutually exclusive. We can hold our position that we still do wish to have a container port in Fremantle, but also welcome negotiation should the port move. I think we can have both. So I would like to move that minor amendment, that note.
Seconded.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm just going to get some advice, because I think I made a ruling before in relation to Councillor Lorvis, Alt Rex, but not Councillor Lang's.
It's not an Alt Rec.
It's listed as an Alt Rec. So in officers' view, it's not the intention of the recommendations that they put forward. So it puts me in a very difficult position, as you can imagine, where officers write their report with an intention and they receive things, and then so we may need to go through what we went through before, because I'm also not going to chuck officers under the bus and say, you know, you were wrong. I'll back officers every time on this kind of thing because they know what they were thinking when they wrote their report. So I would rule based on what the alternative, what the officers have said, that is an alternative recommendation, of which is basically the restatement of the 2018 position. I mean, interestingly, I suspect were tonight's our recommendation, officers' recommendation, voted down, the 2018 position would continue to stand unadulterated anyway. So it is kind of an interesting situation. But I mean, whether you want to do this right now or whether you want to also leave this as an on-rec on the table later.
Understanding orders have been suspended, that's fine. I don't need to copy verbatim. I can put a line through that alternate recommendation, but I would like to move a note that says the 2018 position still stands, that Fremantle wishes to maintain a working container port. I just wanted to have that note in there. I would like to move that, please.
Could I just ask a question?
I think I'm going to get some feedback from the CEO. Is it, so your question is related to that?
Yeah, I just want to ask,
officers?
given that we're in suspension of standing orders zone, I just wanted to ask a question that, I mean, we're not rescinding this motion. If there was just a statement that said, you know, we have a decision determined whatever date that states we did not wish to lose the port as it currently stands because we are concerned about what we actually had in the motion. Just a simple sentence.
I would be more than happy.
Because with that, it's just simply saying that's why we did it, because we don't want to, you know.
I'd be happy with words to the effect of that because,
yeah.
as I stated in my earlier questions, it just isn't clear, and I don't want any ambiguity. I want to be sure I'm voting on a recommendation that says we still support 2018 and we also welcome discussion with the state government.
But I'd like to just say why we support it still, because we want to ensure that whatever the changes, if there are changes, that it remains job, at least.
Okay, Councillor Archibald, I'm going to ask you to work with Councillor Lang in a committee style way. Perhaps go and sit next to him and work out some words that you can both agree on.
Yeah, I'm actually proposing something.
All right.
Yeah, so there are some amendments on the table.
Well, I just think this is the first one that's, you know, it's right at the top. So, as I said, it shouldn't be screamed from the rooftop, and I understand what's been asked for. I think what we're actually doing, notwithstanding that the officers said what the intent of the report was in the beginning of the document, but didn't include that in the recommendation, so it was clear. I think what we should be saying is we welcome the significant process the Future of Fremantle committee have made in relation to the concerns raised in Council's meeting of the 22nd of August 2018. Because for me, that doesn't undermine the decision of 2018, and it actually thanks the Future of Fremantle committee for doing a lot of the work that was identified as concerning, or part of the concerns that the council had in relation to that motion. And it actually also words it in a way that actually brings the two things together so that they aren't mutually exclusive. If we're forced to go down a path that we either have to say, no, we're going to do 2018 or we're going to work with Future of Fremantle, then that's just going to be a dog's breakfast tonight.
But could we just say there that, particularly with regard to, as we had in that
I'm just going to, there's a bunch of people listed to speak, so if everyone can just turn their microphone off if they're not trying to speak right now. Okay, Councillor Lorver is trying to speak on whatever point we're at. Councillor Archibald.
It was just on exactly what Councillor Sullivan said, just if we could add that it was particularly in relation to the loss of, whatever it said in that 2018 document, it said loss of jobs and loss of maritime industry in Fremantle. They were the two things.
All right. So I'm not quite sure who's working on an actual amendment that does this, but Councillor Archibald, it sounds like you've got some words, and Councillor Lang
For the
does.
purpose, this has got the intent I want on the screen. If anyone wanted to add to point 5, I don't know if Councillors Archibald and Solomon have read that. If it's a starting point.
Yep. All right. So we're going back to Andrew's amendment. Sorry, I'm just trying to follow. Yeah, we do need to take officers with us on this rather circuitous route. So we're just pulling Andrew's amendment back up, I think. I know you didn't move it. I'm not quite sure why. So just sorry for people who are playing along at home. This is what committee looks like, and it is as much fun for us as it is for you. Okay. I mean, I suspect in terms of how we might be able to do this is if we can put distinct thoughts in distinct numbers, as in if we want to add a distinct number that says anything, whether it's about traditional owners or container ports, we can at least then vote separately on different numbered items, which allows people to express their position, I think. So broadly, if we can agree to that, it does cause probably Councillor Lawver the most trouble because his proposed amendments go through every numbered item. So we may need to just move those post or pre and vote them up or down.
I'll just call it the document that I sent around earlier today that has different colored text. It actually is a lot cleaner because some of the stuff in the previous amendments that I sent through, it was just repeating. So I'll be working off of that document versus those. It's largely the same as what's printed. But you know, if I may, I mean, with it, this is an item that probably would have benefit from some workshopping, some discussion, a little bit of time, just because, you know, as we're seeing here, you know, we only saw the words in this 5 days ago, and we all have ideas, we all have thoughts, and we all want what's best for Fremantle. So I think if we all had the time to, you know, think about what we want to put forward, and as a council, I think we could cut down the amount of debate that would be happening tonight considerably. You know, I don't think that the timing for getting this in by mid-January to provide feedback to the committee is necessarily relevant. I mean, we have someone from this chamber that serves on the committee, so I don't necessarily agree with it. That deadline is necessarily relevant. And there is nothing wrong with planning. You know, that's what this whole future of Fremantle is. It's about planning for our future. But if you look at the timing of moving the container port, it's likely to blow out significantly. I mean, Westport projected a 3.25% increase every year in trade, compounding. The last 5 years, it's only been 1% growth. And if you look at the past 10, it's only been 1.9. So their fundamental numbers that they're using to say this port has to move are way, way off track. So I'm going to just maybe flag that maybe a deferral for this item might be in order. So that way we can, as a council, maybe informally workshop it, have these discussions, and come back with a position that maybe all of us are closer to supporting rather than debating every single item here tonight.
Okay, so you want to move a procedural motion for deferral, and seconded by Councillor Kamada. And only as so far as speaking once. Yep. So all those in favour of the deferral motion? Sorry, just to be clear, defer to when? And the reason?
Defer to the next appropriate council meeting. And the reason is to allow for council to have discussions about our position.
Okay. All right. All those in favour of the deferral motion? So that is Councillors Kamada, Lawver, Lang and Thompson. And those against the deferral motion, Councillors Archibald, Fitzharding, Williamson, Wong, Sullivan and Van Dawson. So the deferral motion is lost. So back on the item, I'm assuming we would interpret that as we would like to give feedback by January the 15th for those who voted that way. Okay, good. So what can... All right. So we're going back now to Councillor Lang and Councillor Thompson. And sorry, I think this is also Councillor Archibald's. No, okay. Yeah. All right, so you want to move 5 as currently printed there. Let's just get on with some of these then, I think is the best way to go. So you're going to move... Did he? Really? Okay, I hadn't seen it written at that stage, but that's fine.
Oh, sorry, moved it and been seconded. Generally happy with the intent. If anyone wants to modify bits of it, I'm not wedded to it, but I just want to have that piece in there that says that 2018 still stands, and we can vote on it separately as the Mayor suggested.
All right, so on the amendment, Councillor Archibald.
Thank you. I just would prefer, I'm happy to reaffirm the position on the grounds that the council has concerns about the loss of jobs and the loss of maritime industry, and that, so it's on that basis that I supported the recommendation back in 2018. I certainly don't support any recommendation that says we must always have a container port. So that was my support for that motion back then. So if we can make that say that we wish to maintain a container port until it can be demonstrated we will be job positive and what were the two things? Jobs
Marine.
and maritime related industries will be confirmed as part of Fremantle or something like that, because that, to me, that was the reason we did that motion, and that's the little bit I just want to add to it. Otherwise, then I'm okay.
So I don't know how the mover and seconder feel about that. To me, that is something that we might also be able to say in some of the other points.
Initial thoughts on that are it's starting to get too specific, and there are other, and until the port can demonstrate that moving is going to be have a better impact on the environment or create better social outcomes, it's not just about jobs. So I think it's getting too specific. So I prefer not to have it there.
But that was the reason.
We're on the amendment, so I think, to be fair, I think this is the amendment these guys would like to put forward. My view is the simpler it is, actually, the better and clearer when people are voting for it or not. My intention is that we'll make amendments probably to pretty much every sentence in this tonight, but that I will call for a vote separately on each of the numbered points at the end of it.
Or if we said at the end of it, we rounded it and said maintain a container port at this point in time, or something like that.
Okay. I mean, sorry, that doesn't make sense to me. We can tell you, I mean, there is a container point at this point in time, so maybe keep thinking about those words. Councillor Van Dawson, you wanted to speak and then you turned your light on, then you turned it off and then turned it on. Councillor
I'm just deciding whether I want to speak or just put it to the vote.
All right, have a think.
Mindful of time. No, I'll just make the comment. I just think it's a separate discussion. So my understanding is we're providing a comment on the future of Fremantle planning process and the scenarios that have been put forward. This was obviously before my time, this position, and the goalposts have moved. We're in a different context now. They're now saying they want to move the port. and they're asking us to be involved in that. I think it's critical we are to get the best outcomes for our city. And well, personally, I don't support reaffirming our position in this. I don't think it's necessary. There's opportunity to do that. I think it's a completely separate discussion for council, which I would like to be involved in as well. Anyway, that's all I'll say. But thank you.
Councillor Lorva.
Yeah, no, I think that this is quite good in there. And if you look at the position adopted in 2018 and on the agenda, it's very thoughtful. It's a very well thought out position. It talks about the progressive development of Victoria Quay. It talks about support for the wind farm. So I think that there's a bit in there that is a lot more than just jobs and maritime jobs. I also just wanted to point out, if we vote on these amendments, and if they pass, we probably won't need to go back and vote on them one by one, because they would have already been voted on. So we might be able to save some time at the end if we if an amendment passes, that we just count that as passed. So rather than having to vote on it twice.
We have to vote on it twice. Once an amendment's been moved, you have to vote on it. But you could certainly vote one way one time and one way the next, and nothing would stop you from doing that. So Councillor Sullivan had the call first, and then Councillor Williamson.
Thank you. I wouldn't support this amendment. I think it does exactly what I was suggesting. We don't need to scream it from the rooftops. This screams it from the rooftops. We're part of a process. We are actively welcoming being part of this process. We think it's going a long way, and I would rather not vote for this, and I would just move an amendment after it, which would say, welcomes the significant process made by Future of Fremantle Committee in relation to Council's concerns dated 22nd of August 2018. And I think you just put that up the top, and then you get into speaking about the Future of Fremantle Committee's work. Simple as that. Don't need to make it, we don't need to turn the clock back fully to 2018. We're on a journey.
Councillor Williamson-Wong.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I agree with Councillor Van Dawson's point that it feels as if this is a separate issue entirely. We're being asked to comment on the Future of Fremantle planning. And I guess my question to Councillor Lorva and Councillor Lang would be, if you wanted to take this position, which I'm not going to be supporting this amendment, would that be a different item entirely that has to do with the Westport decision and doesn't name Future of Fremantle at all? Because as we've clarified, they're not the ones making a decision about whether or not that port moves.
Thanks, Councillor Williamson-Wong. Look, I tend to agree, and I won't support this amendment. I mean, the 2018 decision doesn't reference at all Future of Fremantle because, of course, it didn't exist then. And this is for the purpose of making a submission to a process so that we do have something to say in that process. We didn't design the timeline for that. My role on the FFPC is as an appointment, not as the mayor, if you know what I mean. So it is a separate role. And the next time the FFPC meets, it will be to review the submissions that have been made as part of this process. So I would hope that City of Fremantle would have a submission highlighting some of the key issues that we've identified as part of that process. And yeah, I see this as not being necessary. Okay, on the amendment, do we have any further speakers before we go to Councillor Lang to close?
Thanks everyone for your feedback on this one. Just a note, Madam Mayor, it does actually explicitly mention Future Fremantle in 2018 in the item, in response to Future Fremantle, Emerging Visions. It is in there. I opened this evening with a question because it wasn't clear to me when I read the report versus when I read the recommendations what I was voting on. The report says it aims to adjust our position, but we don't vote on adjusting our position. I acknowledge the comments from everyone tonight that we are providing feedback at this process in the future of Fremantle, and I support all the feedback that has been written. At this point in time, I haven't been convinced that moving the container port is the best thing for Fremantle. So that's what I wanted to note here explicitly. I didn't want to, by stealth, be voting to eliminate the 2018 position, which is the intent of the report. I wanted to make it explicit that I still have a position that I wish to keep a working port in Fremantle at this point in time, because there's still not enough information that's been provided to us in terms of the business case or social impacts or environmental impacts. So my point at this time is I support a working port in Fremantle. I wish to keep the working port, but as per this item, I also want to provide constructive feedback to the state government and say, great process, we welcome the process. Should the port move, here is our wish list. So that's why I wanted just to keep this here, this subtle, very quiet whisper, not from a rooftop, just to say that we still support that decision that I want it there, so I can say I still support the working harbour until everything else unfolds at a later date.
Thanks. I do just want to clarify one thing in your statement. I think it's to do with how the agenda is printed, but the 2018 decision didn't reference future of Fremantle. It's just referenced at the top of that page, not in the actual decision of 2018, and on page 71 of 161. All right, so I will put the amendment to a vote. All those in favour of the amendment, Councillors Lang and Lorver and Kamada, and against, and so that is lost. Okay, back to the item. Councillor Sullivan, you had some words.
So I flagged an alternative approach which says, welcomes the significant progress made by Future of Fremantle Committee in relation to concerns raised in Council's considerations and resolution of 22 of August 2018, and I will move that one.
Okay, do we have a seconder for that one? Yep. Councillor Lorver's seconding that one. All right. Councillor Sullivan, did you wish to speak on your amendment?
No, it's self-evident.
Councillor Lorver?
I'm just reading it at the moment.
I don't want it to be part of one. If you just make it as a separate thing, and then we move on to welcomes the planning work of Future of Fremantle, right? I think the more we keep them separate, the easier it's going to be.
Yep. All right, we'll just pop that back up on the screen in a sec.
But I do think it would be before one, so it would become the new
It's
one, because I think it's a nice little, just a sweet little reference to the past, and then get on and deal with the future.
Yep. Well, perhaps Councillor Lorver, if you want to suspend your speaking on that until it's on the screen. Did anyone else wish to speak on the understanding of what Councillor Sullivan said? Look, I'm pretty comfortable, you know, again, when I see it, but having been there in 2018, I think that was, you know, certainly what we were asking for was a process, and we got an extensive and expensive process in the Future of Fremantle, in which we've been fortunate to participate. Apostrophe.
Yeah.
Thank
and
you.
if you'd like, it's up to you. I'm happy to move the interim word in the top line as well.
I think that's a good idea. Following interim feedback.
The following interim feedback, because I think there's no objection.
And the seconder is comfortable with what you're seconding? Yep. Okay. All right. On the amendment. Okay, I'm going to put it to a vote. All those, sorry, Councillor Lang, you've just put your microphone on.
Just, I'm still stuck on the same issue I've got. Councillor Sullivan, question through the chair for you. Does this mean you're just saying thanks for acknowledging the concerns in 2018, or is this is the intent of this to say you still acknowledge 2018 and wish to maintain the working port at this point in time?
the intent is to simply acknowledge a decision made in 2018 and that we are currently in a process that is looking at the future of Fremantle Committee's work. And that's where we're at. We're not at another point in time where we're making a decision or commenting on a decision about the relocation of the port. That's not this agenda item. When it becomes that agenda item, we can decide whether we want to rescind or progress. I doubt whether there's enough information, as you rightly said, Councillor Lang, and as Councillor Lawver has said, I doubt whether there is enough information for anybody in this room to put their hand on their heart and say, yep, it's all hunky-dory, relocate the port or relocate part of the port, and all of our concerns have already been dealt with, because they haven't. So we're just in that interim phase.
Thanks, Councillor Sullivan. Yep. All right, I'm going to put Councillor Sullivan's amendments to a vote. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. That was easy. All right. Now, I think it's probably best, perhaps, if we can work through amendments by intention. So I know there's different things people have wanted to add in. So, Councillor Lawver, you would like to move
yeah,
amendments?
I'd like to move the amendment. The wording is about the traditional owners, and it's the red text that I sent through. So I'll just refer to it as the traditional owner amendment.
Okay.
It's on a. I'll resend it around. It's
no, you can't do that. You have to use the original ones as published.
Okay.
So I think it's printed as option 1.
Yep, that's the one.
I don't know what the question is, Councillor Sullivan. Maybe it's a comment. Okay, so do we have a seconder for this? Yeah, you can ask a question.
So we're saying we note the latest planning work. Is that what we're now? That's going to change what we've just agreed to with Councillor Sullivan, isn't it?
Yep. So we've made some amendments. We would be amending those amendments, I think, is what I'm saying here.
So, because that's where Councillor Sullivan's interim was, wasn't it?
I'm happy to have what we just approved in that instead of what's on the screen, and just copy and paste it over.
This feels like it's likely to be a dot point in a list of basically just comments.
I agree.
And so, can we?
Can I just move a partial motion?
Well,
just to make.
Can we agree on?
Can we agree on an amendment on that deals with the intent?
In a list somewhere.
Yeah.
Because there will be other ones. So, for example.
Hang on. We're probably in breach of standing order somewhere, so let's just settle.
Sorry, if I could just intervene for a second. So we did propose these in a dot point format for Councillor Lawver earlier today. If elected members would like to see that, we're happy to put that up on the screen. We actually put them at the bottom of the point 4 under the critical issues list. Yeah.
So that's well and good, but you've ruled, it's been decided that these can be put forward as amendments rather than alternative recommendations. So Councillor Lawver has the right to move them as amendments. If they're not seconded, they lapse, and we can definitely go to the version of it that's a dot point version, but we can't really speak to it until it's been seconded. So I would say if somebody wishes to second this, then we will debate this. If not, then an alternative that's a dot point version can be considered.
There's nothing to stop Councillor Lawver saying I move that we include this wording as a dot point in part 4.
Because it's comprehensive and goes through every section of the recommendation in the way that it's written by Councillor Lorver. I think they're two different things. Is that fair?
I'm happy to move a dot point version. What was provided earlier didn't include some of the wording that actually was done in conjunction with some of the traditional owners. So the bit that we need to kind of hybridize what is part 1 on what's on the screen and then what's in part C. So I think part 1 speaks better on a standalone bit.
Madam Chair, we don't have a second motion.
I know, but we don't know what would be seconding at this point in time, so we're going to have to do a little more work before we can work out whether anyone wants to second it.
So if we can do part 1.
Well, we've got one that the officers have drafted, and
At the moment we've got this one before us. We consider this, and if it's seconded, we consider it, and if it's not, then we go on to something else.
yeah, okay. So what Councillor Thompson is saying is, the ones that you've drafted in total, if that lapses, then we can do it as a dot point as an amendment. So you've moved that. It hasn't been seconded. It lapses.
Of order, isn't that why we suspended so much of standing orders, that we could have this a little bit more flexibly dealt with?
We suspended standing orders to allow people to speak more than once. Okay. So we still need to move and second things procedurally. Okay. So I'm going to rule. So you've moved this.
I'm going to withdraw my motion.
Okay. Thank you.
Withdraw my motion, and instead I would like to put forward a dot point that is part 1, and the words from part C just added on to the end of part 1. And I don't care where it goes in there, wherever it works best. Everything else can, those ones there. Just the green words added on to the end of part 1.
So to be clear, okay, we'll just get that on the screen so that everybody can see what we're talking about. Sorry, when you say part 1, do you mean part 1 or part 2, Councillor Lorver? Because it seems now that we've made an amendment that you actually would mean part 2, I think.
It would be part 2, but part 1 from the original.
Correct, yeah. Okay. All right, so we can now see on screen what you want to move as an amendment.
No. So I don't. This can go at the end, but what I'm asking is part 1 on the alternate recommendation that starts with the potential development of land. You add those words to the end of those ones, and you get a nice dot point that can go anywhere.
Yeah. Okie dokie.
So I can.
So this will take a while, and we're here for a while, and when we get to 9 o'clock, we will move to extend. So we can't do it in the middle of a thing, so we need to deal with this thing, and then we'll be moving to extend the meeting beyond 9 o'clock. I know it's 9:15, but I only just noticed because it's been so enthralling.
There we go. And then after future, add that other bit. Yep. After the word future, add the.
Have a nice stretch. Good for you.
There we go.
Alrighty, so it looks like we have the words, they're not maybe in the right place quite yet, is that?
Yeah, no, it's fine, it's fine. Yeah.
Okay, excellent, so this is now a dot point D, and so Councillor Lorver is moving this as a dot point D. I'm happy to second that.
While we're doing it, we should just remove where it introduces those dot points, the word 3. You've already done that? So just get rid of 3.
Highlights.
So highlights
these critical issues.
The critical issues.
Just highlights critical issues. Very good.
So
fine. Okay, do we need to debate this?
I'll just speak to it if that's all right, real briefly.
Yep.
This is just I think if the port does move, it's our chance to really do something special, and similar to like what council did with One Day by taking the lead. this would get us in a position where we can start to maybe look at how the folks that first occupied that land would benefit culturally and economically from any development that occurs. So I'll be really excited to see that happen.
So I've seconded it because I do want to see some version of this in there. I do want to clarify, include the traditional owners of North Quay being the landowner and lead entity. I think that's a problematic statement. First, because North Quay wasn't a place. Substantially, it's reclaimed land. And being the landowner to me is problematic until such time as we're clear as the remediation of that land, because landowners clearly are responsible for remediation, and I find that problematic. I think it's certainly not the right thing to be doing, to be giving traditional owners potentially one of the most contaminated sites in the metropolitan area. So the intention I completely agree with. I also think that that sort of a request should come directly from traditional owners through the Whadjuk group, as that's their governance model, and if that's what their governance would like to see, then I think that's more appropriate coming from them than it is from us at the City of Fremantle. So I do wonder if we could change those words. I completely agree with it as to governance, but my concern would be the issue of landholder.
That word specifically came from the Whadjuk Noongar Corporation, who was working with to draft this.
So they've got a formal resolution in place.
No, it was just in discussions, like as I was putting words together.
Yeah.
In the conversations, that was a key thing that came from them. I didn't originally have it in there because I thought the intention we could get, which is by being the lead entity. I'm happy to include the North Quay being just so.
Yeah.
I'm happy to remove the words traditional owners.
Perhaps if we could delete after traditional owners through
take
benefiting.
Take of North Quay off. I'm fine with that because that's kind of pretty being and then take off the landholder. I'd be happy to do that to get this passed. Yeah, no, and keep that being the lead entity. Yep.
Can I just? So the lead entity to me would assume that they are leading the process of remediation of. Again, I don't think that's a formal position of Whadjuk. I think there are individuals who may feel like that, but I'm really hesitant to tell Whadjuk what their position should be, because that's not our role. So, yeah, so being to include the traditional owners benefiting economically and culturally from the development of this place.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you, and thanks for working through that. Councillor Archibald?
Yes, I just wanted to make a comment that while I'm happy to have something like this in there, to ensure the people who first occupied the land are no longer here. So it's the traditional owners or the Aboriginal people. That they may not have first occupied the land, but these people may have come from anywhere. They could be, from anywhere in. So I don't want it to be restricted to those who first occupied the land. So I think it's to ensure people, that Aboriginal people, or just Aboriginal people. I think it's fine to be broad, but Aboriginal people benefit both culturally and economically from any non-port development that may occur in the future. That's it, simple, because then it's not up to us to make a decision about who or where they might come from.
Yeah, I can hear that concern.
So a way of dealing with that, Madam Mayor, would be the first part could simply reference First Nations people, because it shouldn't just be Whadjuk Noongar people that benefit from this. I would hope that First Nations people across WA particularly benefit from this. So to ensure First Nations people in the third sentence, and then take out who first occupied the land.
First Nations, so we'll just insert First Nations before the word
Just First
people.
Nations before the word people.
Councillor Love, are you still on board?
Yeah, let's see how that looks.
So First Nations people
benefit.
Yep, benefit both culturally and economically, rather, because that's just a general statement, and then the second statement speaks more to governance and traditional owners, I think.
We do have repetition a little now. We could, so we've got two sentences now that are saying more or less the same thing. The governance model is the thing that distinguishes those two sentences. I would say perhaps what we could do to make the second sentence stand alone would be something like add to it to have a voice in decision making throughout the development of the project or something, because the second sentence seems to speak to governance, whereas the first one speaks to benefiting both culturally and economically, and we're just repeating that at the moment.
The intention is that for them to have more, for people to have more than just a voice in this. It's to actually shape, and so their kids can benefit, because as
leading voice. What word?
I mean, I think we took out landowner and we took out
a decision making role.
Yeah. I had some language that floated around that, but that's not really what was there, and I wouldn't want to just regulate it as being just having a voice. I think just keeping it that benefit economically and culturally, and then that issue, should this actually occur, can be sorted out. We've got plenty of time to sort this out and to advocate for this to happen and how that looks. So I would be comfortable with that as it was. Because as it was put to me, before, I guess white people came, there were people that were living there, and they got pushed east, and now there's First Nations people that, the mob used to call that place home, that now live in Malga and, Midland and places. So this is really important to provide a space for people to come back home, and then use that land now to benefit themselves and their families. Both in a cultural sense and in a real economic sense. So, so I think you're right. It's not for us to decide what that might be, but I just think if we just left it as it was, it still gets to the same place, and it doesn't limit it to just being a voice. It just limits it to whatever actually might occur in the future. Because naturally, a voice would be a part of that.
Okay, so I'm just going to read it out so that everyone's clear on what we've got. The potential development of land currently utilised by the Fremantle Port Authority at North Quay presents a unique opportunity to acknowledge, listen, and hang on, this has gone back to a version from before. So just if you can go back to it, just undo a couple of times. What I was saying, sorry, was to undo the additions that I tried to make to the last sentence. Okay, let's try again. The potential development of land currently utilised by the Fremantle Port Authority at the North Quay presents a unique opportunity to acknowledge, listen to, and ensure the First Nations people, ensure First Nations people benefit both culturally and economically from any non-port development that may occur in the future. It is vital for any governance model over the future of Fremantle study area to include the traditional owners to benefiting economically and culturally from future development of this place. So I'm just a little bit leery about the second half of that last sentence, but can you see where my problem is, Councillor Lorber?
Mayor, can I make a suggestion?
Yes.
Rather than adding words, could we say the potential development of land currently utilised by the Fremantle Port Authority at North Quay presents a unique opportunity to acknowledge and listen to First Nations people, full stop.
Yeah.
It is vital for any governance model over the future Fremantle study area to include the traditional owners. And then I feel like to benefiting is clunky, I don't know that. But then you say economically and culturally from future development. So the first sentence is that it is an opportunity to acknowledge and listen. I don't know, Councillor Lorber, if this is working for you, because your amendment. And then you say the governance model exists to benefit them economically and culturally, separately, not repeated.
All right. Did you follow that?
Do you want me to run it down?
Before we start making the moves, let's make sure the move is happy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's getting close, and it is a little less clunky. Let's have a look at it. If we can, it gets rid of that redundant part, and as long as it just still says, basically it's vital for any First Nations.
Could I just ask, is it really intended to be just traditional owners, or can we say First Nations people?
We've said First Nations somewhere else, so
Yeah.
I think it's probably good to be consistent.
Yes, please.
So we'll just say include First Nations people to include.
The reason I did it separately or suggested it separately is the benefit, I think, should be to First Nations people, but I think if you're going to set up a governance model, it should be with the Whadjuk Noongar people.
All right, I am going to do a couple of things. I'm going to ask that we take a 5-minute adjournment. And so during that adjournment, can we do that while we're on an amendment, by the way?
Here's what I would suggest. I think we're close.
I can do that. Yep, so I'm going to ask for a 5-minute adjournment. I can see that agendas and minutes are going to need just a moment, and that's seconded by Councillor Archibald. All those in favour? Yep. So Councillor Lorver, during the adjournment, 5 minutes, if you and the others who, Councillor Williamson Wong, can just sit with agendas and minutes and try and work out what those words are, that would be great. Thank you.